Chapter 1660. Be careful with your words. Hun Ke said indifferently. It was all thanks to the ancestral land's will that the Soul clan had been able to live in such a peaceful environment since ancient times. The divine lotus was the embodiment of the ancestral land's will, so it could naturally give it to whoever it wanted. However, that was the reason. Seeing the movements in the lotus pond, even Hun Ke could not help but feel that the ancestral land's will was a little biased. No Soul clan member had ever received such treatment. In the lotus pond, Lu Yi saw the four-colored light flowing in front of him. How could he not know that he had hit the jackpot? This was the first time he had seen a divine lotus above 3 colors. When he got closer, it was indeed a 4-colored divine lotus. He immediately spread out his divine sense and the 4-colored divine lotus disappeared. He had just refined the 4-colored divine lotus when he sensed an aura sweeping over from nearby. Soon the aura arrived. Lu Yi fixed his eyes on it. Coincidentally, it was the Soul clan cultivator he had met before. When the Soul clan cultivator saw Lu Yi, he could not help but be startled. Clearly he had not expected to meet him again so soon. He naturally did not have a good impression of Lu Yi. He wanted to ignore him, but he could not suppress his curiosity and asked, "Is there a 4-colored divine lotus growing here?" "No." Lu Yi shook his head calmly. The Soul clan cultivator looked at him suspiciously. "No." He seemed to have seen a 4-colored light just now, but why did it disappear all of a sudden? It was obviously impossible for the person in front of him to have refined it. He had just refined a 3-colored divine lotus right under his nose. How could he have refined a 4-colored one? Looking at it this way, he was afraid that his eyes were playing tricks on him. The Soul clan cultivator was not interested in conversing with Lu Yi, so he quickly left. Lu Yi was already excitedly inspecting his spirit sea. He discovered that the original 3-colored divine lotus had become 4-colored. Moreover, it was in a state where it was evolving toward 5-colored. This undoubtedly meant that his initial guess was correct. As long as he continued to refine it, he would definitely obtain a 5-colored divine lotus in the end. At this moment, the 4-colored divine lotus in his spirit sea was undoubtedly much better than the 2-colored divine lotus in the beginning. Lu Yi could not help but look forward to the effects of the 5-colored divine lotus. He continued to move forward. He felt that his luck was pretty good because he could constantly find monocolored and dual-colored divine lotuses to refine. He faintly felt that this might have something to do with the large number of these 2 divine lotuses. Furthermore, after the Spiritas entered, they would definitely prioritize searching for divine lotuses of higher quality. If they could not refine the higher quality ones, they would settle for the lower quality ones. At present, the lotus pond had only been open for 4 to 6 hours. The Spiritas were probably staring at the divine lotus above the 3-colored lotus. Naturally, no one would pay attention to the single-colored and double-colored lotuses. He didn't mind and he didn't reject anyone who came. Occasionally he would encounter Spiritas who were fighting over a 3-colored or 4-colored divine lotus. Lu Yi didn't participate in the fight because according to this efficiency, even if he only refined the mono and double-colored lotuses, he would be able to obtain a 5-colored divine lotus in less than 3 days. Naturally, there was no need for him to compete with the other Spiritas for the 3- and 4-colored ones. If he encountered it, he could refine it as he pleased. However, as a guest, it was not good to snatch the master's opportunity. In a situation where his luck was good, the 4-colored divine lotus in his spirit sea evolved very smoothly. Another 4 hours later, after Lu Yi refined the last 3-colored divine lotus he encountered, he immediately sensed that the divine lotus in his spirit sea had undergone an obvious change. Calmly observing, the divine lotus in his spirit sea had indeed turned into a 5-colored divine lotus. Silently perceiving it, he found that the 5-colored divine lotus effects were several times stronger than the 4-colored ones. His soul force could clearly grow as it was nourished by the divine lotus. It was a success. But then again his experience was a bit strange. According to Li Shang, the Spiritas could only refine 1 divine lotus. It was impossible for them to refine a second one. But how many had he refined? Moreover, as he refined them, the divine lotus continued to evolve and grow in his spirit sea. This was clearly abnormal. The Spiritas definitely couldn't do such a thing, otherwise Li Shang would have told him. So why was this? Was there something strange about the first 2-colored divine lotus he refined, or was it because of some other reason? He also recalled that since ancient times, besides saint beasts, there had never been a body of flesh and blood that could enter the Spiritas' ancestral land. The reason he was able to enter was most likely because of his talent tree. This was because when Lu Yi was wrapped up in that strange divine lotus, He had clearly sensed that his talent tree had resonated with it. Then, was it also because of his talent tree that he could constantly refine the divine lotus and make it evolve? But he hadn't sensed any reaction from the talent tree during this process. In other words, during the process of the divine lotus evolving, the talent tree hadn't played any role. This was very strange. Since he couldn't figure it out, he couldn't rashly inquire about it. Now that the 5-colored divine lotus was in his hands, Lu Yi prepared to refine the pond water with peace of mind. But just as he was about to do so, another 3-colored divine lotus bloomed beside him. It was clearly a newly bred 3-colored divine lotus. Above the lotus pond, seeing the busy Lu Yi finally come to a stop, the Spirita's disciples all breathed a sigh of relief. It hadn't even been a day. Just how many divine lotuses had this boy refined? They couldn't even begin to count. There were at least several hundred of them. As for those single and 2-colored divine lotuses, the Spiritas didn't care for them at all. But he had also refined some 3-colored and 4-colored divine lotuses. This was truly heartbreaking. Although they didn't know why this human had the idea of settling down, this was still a good thing for the other Spiritas. The elders were truly afraid that this human would continue to refine the divine lotuses. If all the divine lotuses in the lotus pond were refined away by him, then no one else would be able to obtain anything. That would truly be a sin. Of course, it was impossible for them to obtain nothing. There were already Spiritas that had refined their own divine lotuses. It was just that there weren't many of them. There were even more Spiritas that were still waiting and watching, wanting to find higher quality divine lotuses. No matter what, it was best if this human boy could settle down and not run around randomly. However, just as this thought rose up in the elders' minds, they saw that Lu Yi, who had shown signs of settling down, had actually refined another 3-colored divine lotus that had appeared near him. Seeing this, the elders couldn't help but sigh. They felt that with the opening of the lotus pond this time, the cultivators of their race wouldn't be able to obtain many benefits. Within the lotus pond, Lu Ye's expression was extremely strange. This was because he discovered that even though his divine lotus had become 5-colored, he could still continue to refine it. Moreover, after refining it, the 5-colored divine lotus had also undergone some changes. This made him realize one thing very quickly. The 5-colored divine lotus was not the end. The reason he felt that 5-colored divine lotus was the highest quality was completely because of his preconceived notions. This was because Li Shang had said that the highest quality divine lotus born from the lotus pond was 5-colored. Now, it seemed that Li Shang's words were correct, but his understanding was wrong. The 5-colored divine lotus could still continue to evolve. If he continued to refine it, would it evolve into a 6-colored divine lotus, 7-colored divine lotus, or even a higher quality one? Thinking of this, Lu Yi felt that he had suffered a great loss. Previously, he had encountered some 3-colored and 4-colored divine lotuses. But because the Spiritas were fighting over them, he didn't participate. This was because he was certain that he could obtain a 5-colored divine lotus within 3 days. If he had known that 5-colored divine lotus wasn't the end, he wouldn't have let go of those 3-colored and 4-colored ones. At this time, how could he have any awareness of being a guest? A fortuitous opportunity was hard to come by. It would be too much of a pity to miss it. He originally thought that 3 days was more than enough, but now it seemed that time was tight. He immediately turned around and searched in the direction he came from. Because there was a 4-colored divine lotus over there. There were 3 Spiritas fighting over it. That 4-colored divine lotus was surnamed Lu. Soon, Lu Yi arrived at the location of that 4-colored divine lotus. Focusing his eyes and looking over, 4-colored light bloomed. The surrounding soul force undulated incessantly. Clearly the fight hadn't ended yet. Furthermore, it wasn't 3 Spiritas who were fighting. There were only 2 left. There should be 1 Spiritas who knew that he was no match and took the initiative to retreat. At this very moment, the 2 Spiritas who were fighting were both late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators. However, the fight between the Spiritas was different from the fight between ordinary cultivators. This was because their bodies weren't made of flesh and blood. Hence, their means of fighting were mainly soul mystic arts. All kinds of divine soul mystic arts were displayed. The momentum rumbled and soul forces constantly collided and fluctuated. It was quite extraordinary. In such a battle, the side with weaker soul force would easily be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, because they were in the lotus pond, they were surrounded by pure soul force that could easily replenish their soul force. Therefore, once the difference in strength between the 2 sides was not too great, it would be very difficult to determine a victor in a battle. This was also the reason why the two Spiritas had not decided who the divine lotus belonged to until now. Both of them knew that a long delay meant trouble. After all, with the four-colored divine lotus blooming and them fighting endlessly, it was very likely that it would attract the covetous eyes of other races. At that time, the situation would be even more complicated. The two Spiritas had already discussed and reached an agreement. That was, they would join forces. If one side could successfully refine this divine lotus, then they would protect the other side to search for another four-colored divine lotus or even five-colored divine lotus. Although the agreement was reached, they couldn't agree on who would try to refine it first. At this moment, Lu Yi charged over. When the two Spiritas saw this, they looked at each other and unexpectedly abandoned the other. Soul force surged and they attacked Lu Yi. Obviously, they planned to drive Lu Yi away first. The Spiritas' secret techniques were very similar to spells, but the source of power for spells was spirit power, while the Spiritas' secret techniques were soul force. Although the appearance was similar, the essence was different. The Spiritas themselves specialized in the power of the soul. When two late-stage star mansions joined forces, it was impossible for ordinary star mansions to block. But Lu Yi didn't care and charged straight in the direction of the four-colored divine lotus. At the same time, his divine sense surged, outlining complex runes in front of him. In the blink of an eye, an oval-shaped barrier formed purely from soul force appeared in front of him. Holy Guard. The Holy Guard deduced by the talent tree was a spirit rune activated by spirit power, and when activated by soul force, it was a divine rune. Not just the Holy Guard, Lu Yi had tried other deduced spirit runes. Most of them could be activated by soul force. In other words, these deduced spirit runes were both spirit runes and divine runes. It was just that Lu Yi had never had the chance to use these divine runes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1661. Under the protection of the Holy Guard, Lu Yi ignored the secret techniques of the two Spiritas and went straight for them. The two Spiritas were startled because they had never seen such a strange spirit technique before. Although it was strange, they could still see that it was a defensive spirit technique. With the two of them working together, under the premise that they were of the same realm, the other party would not be able to block them. They would definitely be stopped and might even be injured. However, when their spirit technique hit the Holy Guard's barrier, an unbelievable scene occurred. The barrier only shook slightly, but it was not damaged at all. Then Lu Yi passed through the middle of them. In terms of pure soul, under the premise that they were of the same realm, Lu Yi could not compare to the Spiritas. After all, the Spiritas were spirit bodies and focused on spirit body cultivation. This was something that no other race could compare to. However, because of Lu Yi's cultivation, he had used many treasures to strengthen his soul. In the early years he used the soul cleansing water, and in the recent years he started using the soul refining grass. All of them were items that could nourish and strengthen the soul. Especially the soul refining grass, its effects on the soul were outstanding. When Lu Yi was training in the internal space of the Ho, his soul was injured repeatedly, and he had to rely on the soul refining grass to recover. In this cycle of injury and recovery, one's divine soul would naturally become stronger. It could be said that Lu Yi's current soul strength might not be comparable to the Spiritas, but it was not something that any other race could compare to. Furthermore, in a battle of souls, it was not only the strength of the soul, but also the use of secret techniques. The Spiritas' secret techniques were exquisite, but how could the Holy Guard derived from the talent tree be weak? At this moment, it was condensed and outlined by Lu Yi's spirit power. Under the premise of one attack, the Spiritas of the same realm could forget about breaking it. The two Spiritas were shocked on the spot, their eyes wide open. They secretly suspected that Lu Yi had used some kind of defensive spirit treasure? Otherwise, how could the barrier be so tough? Don't even think about it. Seeing Lu Yi rapidly approaching the four-colored divine lotus, the two Spiritas finally reacted. With a furious shout, they hurriedly chased after him. But just as they moved, Lu Yi had already brushed past the four-colored god lotus. At the same time, the four-colored light rays disappeared. The Spiritas who were about to give chase could not help but stop in their tracks. They looked at Lu Yi's figure in shock and did not react for a long time. Where was the four-colored god lotus? Where did the four-colored divine lotus that they had been fighting over go? Please don't say that it was refined by that person just now. They didn't see the other party refining it at all. It should be known that refining the four-colored divine lotus wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. No matter how fast it was, it would still take an incense stick's worth of time. But what was the situation now? That person had only flashed past the four-colored divine lotus, and the divine lotus had actually disappeared. Above the lotus pond, Elder Su Yuan had a headache. He didn't know what was going on with Lu Yi, but there seemed to be a change in his attitude. This was because whenever he encountered a conflict between the Spiritas, he would avoid them as much as possible. But now he had taken the initiative to intervene and even snatch away the four-colored divine lotus. The speed at which this human brat refined the divine lotus was unbelievably fast. At this rate, the Soul Race clansmen had no chance of competing at all. With the opening of the lotus pond this time, the clansmen of the clan probably wouldn't be able to obtain much benefits. At this time, Lu Yi was observing the five-colored divine lotus in the divine sea. After refining another four-colored divine lotus, the five-colored divine lotus changed even more. Lu Yi was completely sure that the five-colored divine lotus wasn't the end. It still had the potential to evolve into a six-colored divine lotus. This made him excited. The five-colored divine lotus's divine soul nourishing effect was already very powerful, so what would a higher quality one be like? He originally thought that 3 days would be more than enough time, but now it seemed that it might not be enough. After all, the higher the quality of the divine lotus, the more divine lotuses would need to be refined during the evolution process. Moreover, the number would increase exponentially. What should he do? After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi thought of an idea. However, whether it would work or not still needed to be verified. If it worked, then things would be much easier. First, he had to find a target to verify. Lu Yi looked around and soon found a monochromatic divine lotus that no one cared about. Standing in front of this single-colored divine lotus, Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry to refine it. With a flick of his finger, a drop of treasure blood flew out. The drop of treasure blood immediately bloomed with a dark red light. When the light dissipated, the treasure blood clone appeared. Then, the treasure blood clone's divine sense surged and quickly refined the single-colored divine lotus. After the treasure blood clone refined the divine lotus, Lu Yi took back the treasure blood clone. At the same time, he carefully observed the changes in the five-colored divine lotus in the divine sense sea. An inexplicable force was injected into the five-colored divine lotus, causing it to undergo an almost imperceptible change. It really worked. The treasure blood clone was similar to the talent tree clone. It could be said that it had basically inherited all the characteristics of Lu Ye's original body. Of course, because the power contained in the clone was limited, it was not suitable for a long battle. Moreover, compared to the talent tree clone, the treasure blood clone was far from the original body. However, although this lotus pond was big, it was not big enough to make the treasure blood clone lose contact with the original body. Therefore, Lu Yi could completely let the treasure blood clone move freely in this lotus pond. If 3 days were not enough for him to do it alone, then he would have a few more. Now that he had 3 drops of treasure blood in his body, in other words, he could create 3 treasure blood clones. If he wanted, he could also create a talent tree clone. Of course, this was the territory of the soul race after all. Lu Yi was not sure if the Sunshine Realm experts of the soul race were paying attention to him. The treasure blood clone was fine, but it was not good to expose the talent tree clone. After all, the process of condensing a talent tree clone was different from the treasure blood clone. 3 treasure blood clones and the original body, 4 of him, should be enough, right? Disperse. In front of the 3 treasure blood clones, Lu Yi waved his hand and immediately turned into 4 streams of light, rushing in 4 directions. This Elder Sunshine of the Soul Race was stunned. Originally, Lu Ye's efficiency in refining the divine lotus was extremely amazing. In just half a day he had refined countless divine lotuses. But since the will of the ancestral land had passed down the order to take good care of him, the Elder Sunshine had let him go. But what was the situation now? Was this human boy addicted to the taste of the divine lotus? He was not satisfied with refining the divine lotus alone, so he created 3 clones? And these 3 clones, even from the perspective of the Sunshine Sect cultivators, it was extremely mysterious. They didn't even know what kind of secret technique it was to be able to create 3 clones that looked so real in such a short period of time. Patriarch. A Sunshine Realm expert who looked like a beautiful woman turned to look at Hun Kei with a resentful expression. This is too much. Patriarch, why don't you do something about it? Hun Kei originally thought that even if the human boy benefited greatly from the opening of the lotus pond this time, the soul race would also benefit greatly from it. But if the situation continued to develop like this, wouldn't it be a situation where the human boy would eat the meat while the soul race would have to drink the soup? In fact, if that human brat had done something even more outrageous, the soul race clansmen might not have even gotten a single drop of soup. Even though Hun Ke had lived for many years, he still had a headache when faced with this situation. Do something about it? How? The will of the ancestral land had already passed down the order. The lotus pond opened early because of Lu Ye's arrival. Should they forcibly take him out of the lotus pond at this time? Didn't they see how the divine lotuses were easily refined the moment his divine thought touched them? Those divine lotuses were all clones of the will of the ancestral land. If the will of the ancestral land did not allow him to refine them, how could it be so easy? If they really forcibly took him out of the lotus pond, wouldn't they be going against the will of the ancestral land? Would he still be the patriarch? Would the soul race still survive here? For a moment Hun Ke had mixed feelings. The soul race had always claimed that they were the people of the ancestral land and were protected by the ancestral land. Even during the great war that swept through the universe in the ancient times, they were safe and sound. But now Hun Ke realized that Lu Yi, who was born as a human, was the real son. The soul race were all illegitimate children. It's not a big problem. Let's wait and see. Hun Ke said calmly, the corners of his eyes twitching. Lu Yi moved quickly. Wherever his main body and 3 clones went, all the divine lotuses were refined. They had a great harvest in one day. On the main body side, the 5-colored divine lotus was already showing signs of evolving into a 6-colored divine lotus. It was estimated that after refining 2 or 3 more 3-colored divine lotuses, it would be enough. The progress of the 3 clones was almost the same. The divine lotuses they refined were all evolving into 5-colored divine lotuses, but they were still at the 4-colored level. Lu Yi wanted to find a 5-colored divine lotus. Because in this kind of refining, he could clearly feel that a ready-made 5-colored divine lotus was equivalent to half a day's effort. Unfortunately, the highest divine lotus he had found so far was only 4-colored. He did not know if 5-colored divine lotuses had not appeared yet or had been refined by the soul race. The number of active soul race members he could encounter was also decreasing. This was because the soul race members who had a harvest would not refine divine lotuses anymore. Instead, they would find a place to refine the pond water here to cultivate and strengthen their soul bodies. Therefore, many of the soul race members Lu Yi encountered would quietly stay in one place, closing their eyes and sitting cross-legged. Even for the soul race members, the opening of the lotus pond was a rare opportunity. At a certain moment, Lu Yi, who was looking around, suddenly turned his head and looked in a direction. In that direction, one of the blood clones had found something. It was exactly what he had been looking for. In the next moment, the void spirit runes around his body outlined, and he disappeared in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already beside the blood clone. The clone did not stop and rushed into the distance, while Lu Ye's main body looked forward. In that direction, several soul powers were colliding and fluctuating. In the center of the collision, there was a 5-colored light blooming. He had finally found the 5-colored divine lotus, and several soul race members were fighting over it. Lu Yi was familiar with this scene, so he immediately moved closer to the battlefield without hesitation. Seeing his actions, the few elders from the soul tribe felt their hearts turn cold. If there were no accidents, the 5-colored god lotus would be surnamed Lu again. End of this chapter. Chapter 1662. As Lu Yi got closer, he actually discovered a familiar aura. Li Shang was here too. Speaking of which, he did not find any trace of Li Shang after entering the lotus pond. He did not expect to meet her here. Taking a closer look, there were a total of 4 spiritlings, including Li Shang, and all of them were late-stage constellation realm. Their strength was similar to Li Shang's. If it was a chaotic battle, who knew how long it would take for the 4 spiritlings to decide the victor? But the current situation was disadvantageous to Li Shang, because the 3 spiritlings did not care about martial ethics, and actually teamed up to deal with her. Obviously they planned to eliminate Li Shang first and then fight the remaining 3. This was a normal method for the spiritlings when they encountered a high-quality god lotus, but it was unknown if the 3 spiritlings had teamed up at the last minute or had already formed an alliance. When Lu Yi arrived, Li Shang already had thoughts of retreating. After all, it was 1 against 3, everyone knew each other's strength, how could she be their opponent? Forcefully staying behind was just asking for trouble. Just as she made up her mind, she unexpectedly sensed a familiar aura approaching. She quickly turned her head to look, and actually saw Lu Ye's figure. She calmed down. Others did not know of Lu Ye's strength, but she knew after all she had possessed Lu Yi many times to fight with Yu Yao, and a few Yu Yao had died at Lu Ye's hands, even Ri Zhao had won. But the spiritlings' fights were not the same as normal fights. Although Lu Yi was strong, she did not know if he could gain any advantage in such a fight. Just as she was thinking, Lu Yi had already made his move, spirit power surged, complex vein patterns spread out. In a blink of an eye, a short blade without a handle appeared and attacked one of the spiritlings. God Edge. The Holy Guardian used his soul power to activate it, and it didn't appear to be much different from using his spirit power. It was a protective barrier. But the God Edge was not the same. If it was constructed with spirit power, it would be attached to the blade, greatly increasing the sharpness of the weapon. If it was constructed with spirit power, it would appear as a sharp blade. Of course, if there was a suitable spirit treasure, it could be added to the spirit treasure, but Lu Yi did not have any spirit treasures that could attack. At first glance, the sharpness was like a short blade without a handle. It tore through the water and instantly arrived in front of a soul. The soul sensed that something was amiss and immediately urged his soul power to protect his body. However, he soon revealed a horrified expression. This was because even with his late-stage Constellation Realm foundation, the defense he condensed was so weak that it could not even withstand a single blow from the sharpness. Then the dazzling light pierced through his body. The Spiritus cultivator cried out in alarm and hastily retreated. If it were a body of flesh and blood that suffered such an attack, blood would definitely splatter everywhere. However, the soul race was ultimately a soul body. Therefore, such a bloody scene did not appear. Such injuries were neither serious nor minor for the soul race. Normally, it would not be difficult for them to recover, let alone now that they were in the lotus pond. With the surrounding pond water as support, recovery was much easier. But the Spiritus cultivator revealed a look of horror. Although it was only a single strike, he could already feel just how terrifying Lu Ye's attack was. It wasn't something he could block. Luckily he had two temporary allies. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, his expression turned sluggish. At the same time his two dying allies also froze, not daring to move. Under the gazes of three pairs of eyes, Lu Yi quietly stood not too far away. Soul power surged around his body and sharp objects began to rapidly form around him. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of sharp divine runes had appeared around Lu Yi, firmly locking onto the three Spiritus cultivators. The three Spiritus cultivators could clearly sense that as long as they dared to move, they would inevitably welcome Lu Ye's barrage of attacks. After witnessing the ferocity of this attack with their own eyes, how could they not know just how terrifying these divine runes were? If they were struck by so many divine runes at once, it wouldn't be as simple as just being injured. Luckily, the other party had no intention of launching an attack. They were likely only here to deter them. As their eyes met, the three Spiritus cultivators tactfully shook their heads and left. If they weren't Lu Ye's match, there was no point in forcing themselves to stay. Moreover, when the Spiritus fought, they would stop at a certain point. It was rare for a decisive battle to occur. What kind of soul technique is this? Above the lotus pond, Elder Su Yuan rubbed his eyes hard and asked in shock. The other elders also had looks of disbelief on their faces. They really wanted to know what this was. They all knew that Lu Yi was a human, but for a human to be able to cultivate such an exquisite soul technique, it was simply too inconceivable. Although Lu Yi had displayed the Holy Guard technique before, this was the first time he used divine runes. For a moment, the elders of the Spiritas were shocked. This was because the speed of the divine runes was too fast. It shouldn't be an ability that a constellation cultivator should have. Moreover, its killing power was incomparably terrifying. The Spiritas of the same realm couldn't block it at all. The Spirita's expression was grave as he slowly said, "This shouldn't be a soul technique." "It's not a soul technique?" The elders of the Spiritas were shocked. Hun Kei said, "There's a type of people from the other races called Spirit Rune Masters. Spirit Rune Masters have a branch called Battle Rune Masters. They're good at using all kinds of spirit runes to increase their strength in battle. Their fighting style is unpredictable and very difficult to deal with. What this kid used should be a Battle Rune Master's technique. Moreover, those should be divine runes." Divine runes? The elders of the Spiritas were deep in thought. They had naturally heard of divine runes. Many soul techniques of the Spiritas even had traces of divine runes. However, this was the first time they had seen such exaggerated divine runes. It wasn't about the power. No matter how strong a constellation cultivator's technique was, it was nothing to them. However, the speed at which the divine runes were activated was too unbelievable. Hundreds of divine runes were activated in a single thought. Was this something a human could do? Damn it. The matron elder sighed. From the looks of it, the first 5-colored god lotus was going to fall into the hands of this human kid. 3 or 4-colored god lotus was one thing, but this was 5-colored god lotus. The Spiritas who could refine the five-colored god lotus were all talented in the Spiritas. Although they might not be able to become as Spiritas, they had more hope than other people. It had been too long since a new Spiritas was born in the ancestral land. With only the support of the older generation, the future was bleak. Congratulations, fellow cultivator. After the three Spiritas left, Li Shang turned to look at Lu Yi with a slightly complicated expression. Although she knew that Lu Yi was very strong, she didn't expect Lu Yi to still be able to suppress cultivators of the same level in such a battle. This was something she had never seen before. Congratulations should be the one. Lu Yi looked at Li Shang. Li Shang didn't understand. I've already refined the god lotus, Lu Yi said with a smile. Li Shang was stunned for a moment. Then she looked happy. Really? Why would I lie to you? Lu Yi raised her hand as she spoke. Suddenly, a five-colored god lotus appeared on her hand. Normally, divine lotuses were in the divine sea, but they could be summoned. However, they were only used to nourish the soul. They had no offensive or defensive abilities, so summoning them was useless. Seeing the five-colored god lotus, Li Shang immediately believed Lu Ye's words. She said in surprise, "Then I'll go refine it." "I'll protect you," Lu Yi said. If Li Shang wasn't here, he wouldn't have let go of this five-colored god lotus. After all, refining a five-colored god lotus was equivalent to half a day's effort. He could definitely make the divine lotuses he already had evolved to 6 colors. But since Li Shang was here, there was no harm in letting her try. Over the past few years, Li Shang had helped him a lot. If it weren't for Li Shang's possession, Lu Yi estimated that he wouldn't have been able to kill Yu Yao with his own strength. Moreover, the ancestors of Immortal Essence City would need Li Shang's care in the future. Yi and Hupa would also stay here. There was no harm in letting Li Shang become stronger. Of course, whether Li Shang could successfully refine Lu Yi couldn't be determined. If she couldn't, it wouldn't be too late for him to make a move. Li Shang looked excited as she approached the five-colored god lotus. She felt a little unreal. Although she also wanted to refine a five-colored god lotus, she knew that it would be difficult. Since ancient times, there hadn't been many people who could refine a five-colored god lotus. Although a five-colored god lotus would appear every time the lotus pond opened, there might not be anyone who could refine it. She just wanted to give it a try. If it didn't work, she would refine a four-colored one. If it still didn't work, then she would refine a three-colored one. If that still didn't work, then she would refine a single two-colored one. Lu Yi had never seen a Soul Tribe member refine a divine lotus. As she watched, Li Shang, who was standing in front of the five-colored god lotus, surged with soul power, enveloping the divine lotus. Soon the five-colored god lotus reacted. Its petals gently opened, like the wings of a butterfly fluttering. Li Shang's expression was slightly excited. Her soul power surged even more intensely. In the next instant, the five-colored god lotus turned into a five-colored stream of light, imprinted into her body and disappeared. Li Shang, who hadn't even begun to use her power, was stunned. "Congratulations, fellow Taoist." Lu Yi congratulated. Li Shang hadn't reacted yet. It wasn't until he repeatedly confirmed that the five-colored god lotus had really been refined into his body that he revealed an excited smile. However, refining a divine lotus shouldn't be so simple, right? Although it was Li Shang's first time participating in the lotus pond competition, she also knew the difficulty of refining a five-colored god lotus. Logically speaking, even if she had the qualifications to refine it, it would take at least an hour. How did she succeed in an instant? Furthermore, why do I feel that our two divine lotuses are a little different? Li Shang asked. The five-colored god lotus that Lu Yi displayed just now seemed to be a little more resplendent than the one she refined. The color was also a little richer. Although she didn't carefully compare, Li Shang felt that the two divine lotuses were quite different. "No, maybe the colors are different," Lu Yi said casually. Li Shang didn't ask any more. Having just refined the five-colored god lotus, she was still very excited. She said, "Although I've refined the divine lotus, there's still some time before the lotus pond closes. The cultivation environment here is rare. Fellow Taoist, please don't waste it. Why don't you cultivate here together? Today I'll take the child to the hospital again. Because it's out of town, I have to go there early. If everything goes well, I'll be hospitalized tomorrow and have the surgery the day after tomorrow. If I don't do my best, please forgive me. I hope everything goes well." End of chapter. Chapter 1663. What's going on? The elders of the soul race Rizhao were all stunned, feeling that today's events were too strange. That human Lu Ye was able to quickly refine the divine lotus thanks to the ancestral land's will, so how could Li Shang be able to do the same? Moreover, it was a 5-colored divine lotus, the highest quality divine lotus in the lotus pond. Logically speaking, even if Li Shang could refine it, it would take him at least half an hour to do so, but in fact, Li Shang only spent a few breaths of time. Compared to the efficiency of the other clansmen, this was simply terrifying. One had to know that in their eyes, the other clansmen were refining divine lotuses at a normal speed and efficiency. This was obviously not normal. Li Shang being able to do this was definitely because of that human boy. The ancestral lands will had taken special care of him, allowing him to refine so many divine lotuses without any effort. He even gave the 5-colored divine lotus to Li Shang, and as a result, even Li Shang was able to enjoy such treatment. This boy is not bad. The woman who had just thought Lu Yi was disgusting couldn't help feeling that he was much more pleasing to the eye. Although he had refined many divine lotuses, causing the soul race to lose some opportunities, allowing Li Shang to refine a 5-colored divine lotus was enough to make up for everything. Not every time the lotus pond opened, a soul race clansman would be lucky enough to refine a 5-colored divine lotus. Often, 10 times the lotus pond opened, only one clansman would succeed. Take this time for example, the Rizhao clan didn't expect any of their clansmen to be able to refine a 5-colored divine lotus, but now that Li Shang had appeared, it was absolutely a pleasant surprise. With the help of this 5-colored divine lotus, Li Shang could be said to have the qualifications to become a Rizhao clan disciple and would be worth cultivating in the future. This old master wants to know one thing. Su Yuan rubbed his aching head. Where did he get the 5-colored divine lotus? As soon as these words came out, many of the soul race Rizhao clan disciples couldn't help being stunned. That's right, where did he get the 5-colored divine lotus? After the lotus pond opened this time, Li Shang's 5-colored lotus was the first to be born. Although Lu Yi had refined a lot of divine lotuses before, but the highest number he had refined was only 4-colored, and most of them were single or double-colored. How could he have a 5-colored divine lotus? But he had clearly just summoned a 5-colored divine lotus. Moreover, Li Shang's 5 divine lotus was different from his own. How could the Rizhao clan elders? Lu Ye's 5-colored divine lotus was abnormal. Whether it was the color or the brightness, it was vastly different from the 5-colored divine lotus that they knew. Thinking back to his previous actions, an unbelievable thought suddenly popped up in the minds of the elders. The woman revealed a shocked expression and turned to look at Hun Quebec Patriarch. Could it be? Hun Ke shook his head slowly. He did not mean to deny it, but he did not know either. The Spiritas had lived here for tens of thousands of years and he had been in control of the Spiritas for thousands of years. But in his entire life he had never seen as many strange and wondrous things as today. It was truly an eye-opening experience. After the lotus pond closes, we'll be able to find out by asking. Normally the sunshine wouldn't bother to pry into other people's secrets, but Lu Ye's 5-colored god lotus made them curious. If they didn't figure it out, the Spiritas sunshine wouldn't be able to cultivate properly in the future. In the lotus pond, Lu Yi rejected Li Shang's invitation. After the Spiritas refined a divine lotus, he was naturally free of worries. He could cultivate here in peace until the lotus pond closed, but he still had work to do. The 3 precious blood clones weren't idle, so his original body naturally couldn't slack off. He explained to Li Shang that he wanted to look around, and Li Shang naturally wouldn't stop him. After bidding farewell to Li Shang, Lu Yi continued to search for and refine the divine lotus. More than 4 hours later, Lu Yi looked at the divine lotus in his spirit sea. After 4 hours of hard work, the 5-colored divine lotus had turned into a 6-colored divine lotus. Moreover, he could continue to refine the divine lotus. It was obvious that it could evolve into a 7-colored divine lotus. This made Lu Yi extremely excited. The 6-colored divine lotus nourishing effect on the divine soul was much better than the 5-colored divine lotus. If it could evolve into a 7-colored divine lotus, it would definitely be stronger. Sensing the progress of the 3 precious blood clones, Lu Yi felt that there was still a big gap between him and the 7-colored divine lotus. He had to work harder. Calculating the time, the lotus pond would close in a day. However, there was good news. One of the precious blood clones found another 5-colored divine lotus, and Lu Ye's original body hurried over. Although the precious blood clones had inherited all of Lu Ye's strength, as long as they had suitable weapons, they could almost display his normal strength. However, because they were precious blood clones, they were different from the talent tree clones. Precious blood clones couldn't quickly activate the divine runes. In such a competitive environment, the divine runes were the key to fighting the enemy, so only the original body could take action. The powerful killing power of the divine blade divine runes was not something that the spiritas of the same realm could resist. The original body only showed a little of its means, and it made the spiritas who were fighting for the five-colored divine lotus retreat. The situation was almost the same as when he encountered Li Shang. After refining this five-colored divine lotus, he would be one step closer to the seven-colored divine lotus. When there was only half a day left before the lotus pond closed, Lu Yi was the only one left in the entire lotus pond. The other spiritas had either refined the divine lotus and didn't have any desires, so they used this special environment to cultivate. Or they didn't gain anything and knew that they couldn't refine any divine lotus, so they didn't waste time and used this place to cultivate. This made it even more convenient for Lu Yi. Even though he had been refining the divine lotus for the past few days, there were still single-colored and double-colored divine lotuses in the lotus pond. After being refined by him, they turned into nutrients for the divine lotus in his divine sea. He secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he had the precious blood clones. Otherwise, with the original body alone, he definitely wouldn't have enough time. Until a certain moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the ears of everyone in the lotus pond. After an incense stick of time, the lotus pond will close. All clansmen must leave quickly. This was obviously the Spiritas powerhouse informing the clansmen so that they wouldn't come out too late and something unexpected would happen. For a time in the entire lotus pond, many Spiritas flew up. Lu Yi also stopped his busy figure. Time was up. He didn't know if he could obtain a seven-colored divine lotus by combining the divine lotuses of his original body and the three precious blood clones, but he estimated that it wouldn't be too much of a problem. This was because not only did his original body have a six-colored divine lotus, but one of the precious blood clones also had a six-colored divine lotus. Although the other two precious blood clones only had five-colored divine lotuses, whether they were six-colored or five-colored, they weren't in a newly evolved state. Rather, they had refined many more divine lotuses on the basis of their evolved state. If these four divine lotuses were combined, there was a high probability that they could evolve into a seven-colored divine lotus. Right? Of course, if it didn't work, then there was nothing Lu Yi could do. He couldn't just stay here. Whether it was six-colored or seven-colored, this was a pleasant surprise. Before coming to the Spiritas' ancestral land, he hadn't expected to obtain such a benefit. Now that he had it, he didn't need to be too demanding. As the spiritual power around his body surged, a void spirit inscription appeared under his feet. In the next moment, the three precious blood clones teleported from three different directions and disappeared into Lu Ye's body one by one. Lu Yi didn't stop and rushed up. At the same time, he could clearly feel that some wonderful changes were taking place in his spirit sea. Under close attention, he saw that the original six-colored divine lotus in his spirit sea, after fusing with the divine lotuses brought back by the three precious blood clones, quickly evolved into a seven-colored divine lotus. For a time, multicolored light bloomed in his spirit sea, covering all corners. At this moment, Lu Ye's mind couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity that he had never felt before. It was as if he was a pure jade, untainted by even a speck of dust. He could clearly feel that if he comprehended any secret technique or obscure technique in this state, the efficiency would be greatly improved. This was undoubtedly very useful for him, because whether it was comprehending the inheritances left by the many ancestors in the skeleton or deducing spirit inscriptions with the talent tree, he needed such clarity of mind. It could be foreseen that in the future, when he deduced spirit inscriptions or comprehended some inheritances, the efficiency would be greatly increased. In addition, Lu Yi also had a very strange feeling that was, he seemed to have some wonderful connection with the entire ancestral land. However, before he could understand what this connection was, he had already left the lotus pond. In the next moment, he immediately felt many gazes looking in his direction. Looking up, he saw that the elders of the Spiritas were looking at him with complicated expressions. Lu Yi felt a little guilty. This situation. Could it be that what he did in the lotus pond was seen by them? That must be it, otherwise why would these elders look at him like this? A loud boom suddenly sounded as the gigantic lotus pond began to tremble. The water in the lotus pond also began to tremble. Following that, under the watchful eyes of many Spiritas, the blooming lotus pond's petals began to close. Soon, it returned to the appearance of a budding flower bud. This time the competition for the lotus pond was completely over. Hun Kei's voice sounded again, it was nothing more than to encourage the Spiritas who participated in the competition for the Lotus Pond. He wanted the Spiritas to not be arrogant and to continue working hard, and for the Spiritas who did not gain anything to cultivate and improve themselves, hoping to gain something the next time the Lotus Pond opened. Not long after, the Soul Race clansmen dispersed. Lu Yi, Li Shangyi, and Hupa also gathered together. Yi was clearly very happy when she learned that Li Shang and Lu Yi had both gained something this time. She also looked forward to the next time she participated in the Lotus Pond battle. The group was about to rush to Li Shang's five-colored lotus land. Lu Yi, don't be in a hurry to leave. Hun Ke suddenly called out to him. Lu Yi turned to look at Hun Ke and saw that the elders of the Spiritas were all looking at him. I'll go over. Senior Hun Ke probably has some instructions, you guys go back first. Lu Yi said. Li Shang nodded, but Yi was a little worried. Are you all right? Lu Yi smiled. I'm fine. If something really happened, he would not be able to avoid it, as there were several elders of the Spiritas here. Li Shang was not worried about the elders of the Spiritas, so he comforted Yi and left with her and Hupa. Only then did Lu Yi walk to Hun Ke and the other Spiritas, bowing. Greetings, seniors. Chapter 1664. Lu Ye's attitude was respectful, and the other Spiritas nodded slightly. Disregarding everything else, this human kid's temperament was extraordinary. One look and they could tell that he was not an ordinary person. They had all gone out to explore and had seen many geniuses from other races, so they naturally had a good eye for people. But then again, if he was really an ordinary person, he would not have touched the will of the ancestral land and received such care from it. You don't have to be nervous. We called you here to ask you something, Elder Su Yuan said kindly. Lu Yi nodded. He was not nervous. What do you want to ask, seniors? Hun Ke said directly, can you summon the divine lotus you refined and let us see it? He was really curious if Lu Ye's situation was as they had guessed. After saying that, he added, of course it's fine if you don't want to. Lu Yi pondered for a moment. Since he obtained the divine lotus from the Spiritas, it was the kindness of these Spiritas to let him enter the lotus pond. Since they wanted to see it, he could not refuse. He nodded and said, if seniors want to see it, there's no problem. As he said that, he stretched out his hand and soul power surged. In the next moment, a seven-colored light bloomed, and a beautiful divine lotus that looked like it was carved out of jade appeared in his palm. The Spiritas were shocked, and they all looked at the seven-colored divine lotus in disbelief. Although they had guessed it, they still could not believe it after it was confirmed. The matron elder exclaimed, seven-colored. When Lu Yi had summoned the five-colored divine lotus, they had faintly guessed that the divine lotus Lu Yi refined would evolve to a higher quality, but they never imagined that in a short 3 days, it would evolve into a seven-colored divine lotus. They thought that six-colored divine lotus was the limit. After the shock, their gazes gradually became infatuated because even they did not have a seven-colored divine lotus. Their deity sees only had five-colored divine lotus. The matron elder calmed her complicated emotions and said, in that case, the divine lotus you refined in the lotus pond can merge into one and evolve to a higher quality? That's right. The Spiritas suddenly felt strange and they did not know why they felt a little jealous. Ancestral land, you are too biased. The Spiritas could only have a five-colored divine lotus, but a human kid who came out of nowhere could have something they yearned for. There was a moment of silence. Very good. After a short while, Hun Ke spoke slowly as he gazed at Lu Yi. This is your fortuitous encounter. Don't let it go to waste in the future. After a pause, he continued, since ancient times only Spiritas, a non-saint beast, can have a seven-colored divine lotus. You are the first to have a seven-colored divine lotus. With the help of this divine lotus, it will be much easier for you to become a Spiritas, a divine lotus. He was afraid that Lu Yi didn't know how precious the seven-colored god lotus was, so he deliberately told him more. Lu Yi revealed a look of surprise. Seniors also don't have a seven-colored divine lotus? Su Yuan could not help but glare at Lu Yi. Kid, if you talk like this, it's not very kind. Didn't you hear the patriarch say that only Spiritas could have a seven-colored divine lotus? Hun Ke clearly did not want to bother with this and continued, the five-colored divine lotus's effects are already extremely powerful. If you obtain the seven-colored divine lotus, the effects will only be greater. However, remember one thing. You cannot neglect the improvement of your cultivation. After all, you have a body of flesh and blood. You are different from my soul clan. To you humans, it is not necessarily a good thing to have a strong divine soul. If one day your cultivation does not match the strength of your divine soul, it might be troublesome. Lu Yi could not help but look serious and said, "Patriarch, please enlighten me." Hun Ke said, "Let's put it this way. To you humans, the physical body is the container for your divine soul. As your cultivation increases, the container will slowly become larger. So even if your divine soul becomes stronger as your cultivation increases, the container will still be able to hold it. However, if your cultivation stagnates while your divine soul continues to grow, there will be a day when the container will burst. At that time it will be troublesome." This was the first time Lu Yi had heard such a thing. But since it was said by the patriarch of the Spiritas, it must be true. There should not be a living being in this world whose divine soul was strong enough to burst the container of the physical body. After all, no matter what kind of living being it was not easy to improve their divine soul. But now that Lu Yi had the 7-colored divine lotus, if he did not work hard to improve his cultivation, such a situation might happen. That was why Hun Ke specially reminded him. Although he saw that Lu Yi was not old, he was already at the late-stage constellation realm. His talent must be extraordinary, and such a person's cultivation speed would not be too bad. "I understand." Lu Yi nodded seriously. Su Yuan chuckled and said, "If such a day really comes, it doesn't matter. When the time comes, come to my Spiritas, and you will have great achievements." When the other Rizhao heard this, they felt that it was a good idea. If Lu Yi also became a member of the Spiritas, he would be one of them. With the 7-colored divine lotus, his future growth would definitely not be inferior to them. If he was a member of the Spiritas, there was nothing wrong with the will of the ancestral land taking special care of him. "Thank you for your kindness, Elder." The corner of Lu Ye's mouth twitched, and he secretly decided that he must pay attention to the improvement of his cultivation. He must not let the situation that Hun Ke mentioned happen. "By the way, Patriarch," Lu Yi thought of another thing. "After obtaining the 7-colored divine lotus, I feel that there is a strange connection between me and this space. What's going on?" After taking back the 3 doppelgangers and fusing all the divine lotuses together, the divine lotuses in the divine sense C turned into 7 colors. Lu Yi had this kind of connection. When he was talking just now, he sensed it a little and found that this kind of connection did indeed exist and was very close. The divine lotus was nurtured by the lotus pond in the ancestral land. It was understandable that he would have a connection with the ancestral land after refining it. It was just that he did not understand what this connection meant. Taking this opportunity with many Rizhao present, he wanted to ask for advice. "Connection? What kind of connection?" Hun Ke was stunned. Lu Yi described it in detail, but as he described it, he found that the expressions of these Rizhao became more and more strange. After Lu Yi finished, he could not help but ask with some apprehension, "Elders, is this a good thing or a bad thing?" The main reason was that the Rizhao's expressions were too strange. It was as if they knew something but they did not want to say it directly. "Come with me," Hun Ke suddenly said. As he said this, his soul power surged and wrapped around Lu Yi and his body swayed. Lu Yi only felt a trance. When he reappeared, he was no longer beside the lotus pond, but on a lotus land. From the feeling that this lotus land gave people, it must be a 7-colored lotus land because the cultivation environment here was much better than Li Shang's 5-colored lotus land. After Lu Yi stood still, he realized that the other Rizhao elders had followed him. They looked like they were watching a show. Elder Su Yuan laughed. "Don't panic. If the situation is as we think, it's a good thing for you." Lu Yi nodded in agreement. However, when he saw Elder Su Yuan smile, he felt that things were not so simple. However, his attention was quickly attracted by a pond in front of him. This pond was not big, but there were specks of light inside. At first glance it did not seem special. However, when he looked closer, Lu Yi was surprised to find that the specks of light were like the light of stars. This small pond was like a miniature version of a starry sky. This is the Starry Sky Pond. It is the core of our soul clan. Because of this Starry Sky Pond, the ancestral land can connect to all parts of the starry sky. Hun Ke explained briefly, but he did not explain too much. Then, without waiting for Lu Yi to ask, he used his soul power to wrap him up and throw him into the Starry Sky Pond. The small pond suddenly enlarged in Lu Ye's vision. In an instant, he felt that he was not thrown into a pond, but an entire starry sky. The tiny specks of light quickly turned into huge celestial bodies. They were dazzling. When Lu Yi came back to his senses, he was standing in the middle of a starry sky. Hun Ke was standing not far away with his hands behind his back. Lu Ye's heart trembled when he sensed it. Even though he had learned some of the mysteries of the soul race's ancestral land from Li Shang when he returned to the ancestral land and heard Hun Ke's explanation, He still couldn't help but be surprised when he personally experienced it. He was sure that this was no longer the Soul Clan's ancestral land. This was a location in the vast starry sky. In other words, after Hun Ke brought him into the Starry Sky Pond, they came here from the Soul Clan's ancestral land through the mysteries of the Starry Sky Pond. The Starry Sky Pond could be seen as a complex insect path that connected to all parts of the starry sky. However, the location of the insect path was usually fixed. Although the Starry Sky Pond was fixed, there was more than one choice to use the Starry Sky Pond. In this small Starry Sky Pond, there was more than one place that could connect to the starry sky. Lu Yi looked around and found that this starry sky was very unfamiliar. He was sure that he had never been here before. But, why did Hun Ke bring him here? Just as Lu Yi was puzzled, Hun Ke said, "Connect your mind to the rainbow god lotus in your divine sea and see if you feel anything special." Lu Yi was puzzled, but he did as he was told. His mind connected to the rainbow god lotus. In the next moment his expression changed slightly. Because after coming here, the strange feeling in the Soul Clan's ancestral land had disappeared. But when he connected his mind to the rainbow god lotus, that strange feeling appeared again. But compared to the Soul Clan's ancestral land, it was much weaker. Seeing the change in Lu Ye's expression, Hun Ke confirmed his thoughts. As expected. Patriarch, what is going on? Lu Yi asked. End of chapter. Chapter 1665. Hun Ke said, "Since you came back with Li Shang, you must have seen how Li Shang connected to the ancestral land and opened the passage." "I have." Lu Yi nodded. Hun Ke said, "Every soul has such an ability. Our clansmen borrow the power of their own soul race. You are a human, so you naturally don't have a soul orb, but your rainbow god lotus can replace a soul orb and play a similar role." Lu Yi immediately reacted. "In other words, I can enter the soul race's ancestral land from here like Li Shang?" "Give it a try," Hun Ke said. Lu Yi was very excited. When he failed to stop Yi from entering the soul race's ancestral land, he was most depressed that he could not visit her at any time. This time he did not know when they would meet again. But if he had the ability of the soul race, it would be much more convenient to enter the soul race's ancestral land. When he wanted to visit Yi, he just needed to find a suitable place and connect with the rainbow god lotus to enter. Carefully recalling Li Shang's action of connecting to the soul race's ancestral land, Lu Yi summoned his rainbow god lotus and poured his soul power into it. Soon he felt that the strange connection was becoming closer and closer. About 2 hours later, the space in front of him suddenly rippled like water. Then the space became blurry and distorted. This situation was exactly the same as when Li Shang used a soul orb to connect to the ancestral land. However, Lu Yi was much faster than her. Li Shang used half a day to connect to the ancestral land, but he only needed 2 hours. In terms of efficiency, Li Shang could not be compared to him. This was clearly the wonder of the rainbow god lotus. Although it was not a soul orb, it was undoubtedly much more effective than a soul orb of the same realm to connect to the soul race's ancestral land. If he encountered any danger in the future, he might be able to use this method to escape. However, 2 hours was a little long. If he encountered a powerful enemy and could not escape, this method would not work. Moreover, connecting to the ancestral land had some special requirements. It could not be done anywhere. So if he wanted to use this method to escape, he would have to rely on luck to a large extent. Space was distorted and blurred like a cloud of fog. Soon, many colors bloomed from the fog, just like the scene Lu Yi saw last time. A lotus bloomed in the fog, and the stamen of the lotus was wrapped in fog, leading to an unknown place. Hun Ke watched quietly from the side and nodded slightly. It seemed that the rainbow divine lotus really did give Lu Yi the ability to communicate with the ancestral land. Moreover, it only took 2 hours. This speed was comparable to many Yu Yao. "Let's go in," Hun Ke said. Without hesitation, Lu Yi dove into the stamen. When he regained his footing, he discovered that he had indeed returned to the Spirita's ancestral land. As far as the eye could see, all he could see were lotuses of all sizes and colors. However, this place wasn't the starry sky pool. It should be somewhere in the soul race's ancestral land. If that was the case, then entering the soul race's ancestral land from the outside would appear in a random location. Lu Yi deduced. Hun Ke followed him in and stood beside him. It was Su Yuan and the other elders of the Sunshine sect. Obviously, they had rushed over after noticing the commotion. The few of them looked at Hun Ke questioningly. The latter nodded. He really could do it. This matter was a little ridiculous. Since ancient times, no flesh and blood had been able to enter the ancestral land. This time, not only did a human brat enter, he even triggered the will of the ancestral land and caused the ancestral land to pass down instructions. Now he even obtained a rainbow divine lotus that only the sacred beasts of each generation could possess. Most importantly, he could use the rainbow divine lotus to travel to and from the ancestral land. After living for so many years, this was the first time the elders of the Sunshine sect had seen such a bizarre thing. However, after thinking about it, all these bizarre things were built on the extra care that the ancestral land had given him. Without the permission of the ancestral land's will, these things would not have happened. Elder Su Yuan rolled his eyes and laughed loudly. Brat, in the future, you can be considered half a member of the soul race. Although he was a human, he had the ability that only the soul race had and could enter the ancestral land. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was half a member of the soul race. Moreover, the soul race was worth roping in such a person who was specially cared for by the ancestral land's will. Lu Yi was stunned. He immediately nodded and bowed. Then please take care of me in the future, elders. Of course, of course. Su Yuan chuckled. It seems that you still don't know what the greatest benefit of your seven-colored god lotus is. Lu Yi thought for a moment. The seven-colored god lotus undoubtedly had a great effect on nourishing the soul. In addition, it could allow Lu Yi to enter the soul race's ancestral land from a suitable place in the starry sky. However, listening to Su Yuan's words, there seemed to be other benefits as well. Lu Yi hurriedly asked, "Please enlighten me, elder." Su Yuan said, "The members of the soul race can use the soul orb to connect to the ancestral land from a suitable place in the starry sky. But don't forget about the starry sky pool. With the starry sky pool, the soul race can also travel to certain places in the starry sky. Boy, do you understand now?" Lu Yi thought for a moment and his eyes lit up. Yes, the starry sky pool's mysteries were undoubtedly another great benefit of the seven-colored god lotus. Just now he was so surprised that his seven-colored god lotus could replace the soul orb that he didn't think of this. Now that he thought about it carefully, if he wanted to go to a certain place in the starry sky in the future, he could use the starry sky pool to achieve his goal. Even if he couldn't reach his destination directly, he could certainly go to a nearby area and save a lot of time. For example, when he wanted to return to the 9 prefectures, it took him several years to travel from the Myriad Constellation Galaxy to the 9 prefectures. However, if he used the starry sky pool, he might be able to reach the Jade Conch Galaxy directly, or even somewhere close to it. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. If he had known this would happen, he would have sent Li Shang back before returning to the 9 states. But at that time he wasn't very familiar with Li Shang. Moreover, he couldn't have predicted that he would obtain such benefits from the soul race's ancestral land. Naturally, he couldn't have made such a decision. At that time he was still hoping to bring Li Shang back to the 9 states to solve the problem of Immortal Essence City. Moreover, that trip had indirectly resolved a future crisis in Jade Conch Galaxy, because if he hadn't helped Wu Ding and the other 4-star systems deal with the joint forces of the insect and blood races, Jade Conch Galaxy would have been the one to suffer in the future. In that case it wasn't a loss. Patriarch, since he's a member of the soul race, does he have the right to choose a lotus land of his own? Su Yuan looked at Hun Ke and wanted to rope him in. Lu Ye's performance this time had surprised them. Such a person would definitely be extraordinary in the future, so it wouldn't be bad for the soul race to rope him in now. Hun Ke clearly understood Su Yuan's intentions. He nodded slightly and said, "Of course." He looked at Lu Yi. "If you're willing, you can choose a 5-colored lotus land to live in." Li Shang could choose a 5-colored lotus land because he brought back a sacred beast. Even if he broke the rules of the soul race, it was enough to offset it. Lu Yi could choose a 5-colored lotus land because of his performance, but more importantly, it was because of the ancestral land's instructions. As for the 7-colored lotus land, that was something only the Sunshine could choose. Lu Ye's cultivation was still low, so he couldn't use it. Lu Yi revealed a grateful expression and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Patriarch and Elder. However, I'm not a true member of the soul race, so I don't plan on staying here for long. It was an accident that I was able to enter the ancestral land, so I'll be leaving in a few days." He still had to rush to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, so how could he stay here forever? Hun Ke also said that he had to pay attention to the improvement of his cultivation in the future. It was comfortable to stay here, and the improvement of his spirit's power was fast, but it would only intensify the conflict between his physical body and his spirit. Hun Ke wasn't surprised when he heard this. He nodded and said, "You're a human, so you should go out and explore more. Since that's the case, you can keep the right to choose a lotus land. You can go whenever you want in the future." "Thank you, Patriarch." The Sunshine didn't stay for long and soon left under Hun Ke's lead. Before Su Yuan left, he said to Lu Yi, "Whenever you want to leave, come and find me. I'll bring you to the Starry Sky Pool." He was the elder on duty for the soul race for the past 100 years, so he was responsible for this. After watching the sunshine leave, Lu Yi excitedly rushed to the Lotus Land where Li Shang was. It took him a lot of effort to find it. The main reason was that he wasn't familiar with this place. Li Shang and Yi were waiting anxiously. After the Lotus Pond battle, all the soul race members left, but Lu Yi was asked to stay by the Patriarch and the Sunshine Elders. Li Shang and Yi didn't know what happened, so they were naturally worried. Now that they saw him return safely, they were relieved. "Li Yi, are you okay?" Yi looked at him nervously. "I'm fine." Lu Yi smiled and shook his head. He rubbed Yi's head. It was a good thing. He could already imagine Yi's surprised look when he suddenly came to visit her. Well, it was better not to tell her that the Rainbow God Lotus could replace the Soul Orb. He would give her a surprise later. "Why did the Patriarch and the others look for you?" Li Shang asked curiously. Lu Yi said, "Nothing much, just a casual chat. They asked me to come and visit more when I'm free." Li Shang's eyes twitched. Of course he didn't believe Lu Yi's nonsense. What she didn't know was that Lu Yi was telling the truth. With the Rainbow Divine Lotus, whenever he wanted to come here in the future, he wouldn't be able to come here at any time, but it wouldn't take much effort. He was in a good mood. Lu Yi didn't stay here for long. Since it would be convenient for him to go to the soul race's ancestral land in the future, there was no need to be reluctant. On the other hand, although Yi was determined to come back with Li Shang, when it was time to leave, her eyes were red. If it weren't for the fact that her soul couldn't shed tears, she would have burst into tears. She had waited for so many years in the 9 regions and finally, Lu Yi returned safely. But she didn't expect that they would be separated again after just a few years. But this was her own choice, because only by staying here could she walk the true path of the soul race and have the ability to fight side by side with Lu Yi in the future. Otherwise, the gap between them would only grow bigger and bigger. Chapter 1666. On Li Shang's 5-colored floating continent, Yi and Lu Yi waved goodbye while Hoopa growled. They wanted to send Lu Yi off, but Lu Yi didn't let them. There was no need to. Now that he had the Rainbow God Lotus, it would be easier for him to come back in the future. Soon Lu Yi's figure disappeared from sight, leaving Yi disappointed. Li Shang walked over and put his arm around her shoulder, comforting her. "There will be a time when we meet again in the future. When the time comes, use the soul possession technique. Even if your cultivation is lower than his, you will still be of great help." Yi nodded firmly. Since she had chosen this path, she would walk it properly. Lu Yi had been to Elder Su Yuan's floating continent before, so he was familiar with the path and found it without much trouble. Then, under Elder Su Yuan's guidance, the two arrived at the Starry Sky Pond. Pointing at the Starry Sky Pool, Su Yuan said, "This is a miniature of the entire Starry Sky. In theory, the outline of the entire Starry Sky is in this pool. So, if you want to go somewhere, you can use the star map to find a suitable area and use this pool to reach it." Although Lu Yi had the experience of entering a certain location through the Starry Sky Pond, he was still amazed by Su Yuan's words. What kind of place was the soul race's ancestral land? Why was the Starry Sky Pond so mysterious? After all, a space was connected to the entire Starry Sky. Even the reincarnation tree couldn't do this. The reincarnation tree could only rely on countless clones to achieve this connection. Lu Yi was even more certain that the soul race's ancestral land wasn't a Starry Sky's supreme treasure. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so mysterious. According to his original plan, he was going to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone this time. After sending Li Shang back, he would return to the Myriad Phenomenon Galaxy and enter another galaxy through a bug path. Then, it would be a long journey. It would take at least a year. According to the information he obtained, the Yin-Yang Millstone was a space wonder located in a desolate star region. This was because this space wonder was extremely rare, and it was a space wonder that had been slowly growing. In other words, its size was gradually increasing. In the entire Starry Sky, this kind of special Starry Sky wonder was rare. The more common ones were the ones that were disappearing because they had existed for too long and could no longer be maintained. Of course, even if they were disappearing, they would not disappear in a short period of time. It could take hundreds, thousands of years, or even thousands of years. If the space wonders were treated as living beings, then the disappearing space wonders would be in their twilight years, while the Yin-Yang Millstone would be in its prime. Of course, not all space wonders would grow or disappear. Many space wonders had existed since the ancient times without much change. The 10,000 Elephant Sea was one of them. "Kid, where are you going?" Su Yuan asked. Lu Yi stared at the specks of light in the starry sky pool. It was as if he could see the miniature images of many galaxies. However, if he really wanted to find the location of the yin-yang millstone among these miniature images, it would be difficult. This was because he wasn't familiar with the starry sky environment around the yin-yang millstone. Otherwise, they could have used a mutual imprint to determine their position. I want to go to the yin-yang millstone, Lu Yi said. Su Yuan was startled. He glanced at Lu Yi and nodded slightly. Your cultivation has reached the peak stage of the star constellation realm. You must have received some guidance from an expert, so you want to temper your physique in preparation for advancing to Yu Yao, right? Lu Yi was slightly stunned. The yin-yang millstone can temper my physique? He had gone there because of the reincarnation tree's suggestion. However, he really didn't know what benefits he could obtain there. Now that he heard Su Yuan's words, he finally understood that the space wonder could help one temper their physique. If that was the case, then was there still a need for him to go? His physique had already been cultivated to the extreme. He could even condense treasured blood. Lu Yi felt that it was very difficult to find any external force in this world that could improve his physique to the next level. Naturally. Su Yuan nodded. That is a dangerous place, but it is also a wonderful place. Elder, are you very familiar with the yin-yang millstone? Lu Yi asked. Su Yuan said, it's just as when this old man was young, I traveled there before. Lu Yi immediately asked, Elder, can you tell me more about this starry sky wonder? Su Yuan thought for a moment, then chuckled. There's no need to tell me. You will naturally experience it when you get there. So mysterious. However, you still have to be careful. That place isn't peaceful. Don't stick your head out when you encounter trouble. If it doesn't concern you, just ignore it. Yes. Lu Yi answered. The starry sky pond is connected to the yin-yang millstone. It can only reach this place. As Su Yuan spoke, he used his divine sense to guide Lu Yi. From the starry sky pond, Lu Yi couldn't tell how far it was from the yin-yang millstone, but it would definitely save him a lot of time compared to his original plan. Then let's go there. Wait a moment. Su Yuan stopped him. Lu Yi turned around and saw Su Yuan handing over a storage ring. There are some soul jades inside. Take them. The patriarch instructed me to give them to you. Lu Yi revealed a happy expression and hurriedly received them. Naturally, he knew about the soul jade. It was an item on the same level as the spirit jade. However, the spirit jade was used to recover spirit power, while the soul jade was used to recover soul power. It could be said that each piece of soul jade was equivalent to a supreme-grade soul refining pill, or even more powerful. However, soul jades weren't as common as spirit jades in the starry sky. They could even be collected in the starry sky. Soul jades were only produced in some very special places. The environment of the soul race's ancestral land was blessed by the heavens and could naturally produce soul jades. Many thanks, Elder. Lu Yi said happily, please thank the patriarch for me. The soul race's ancestral land was a good place. He would come again next time. Go. Su Yuan chuckled and waved his hand. Then I'll be going. As Lu Yi spoke, his divine sense surged and locked onto the location Su Yuan was pointing to. He thanked Su Yuan again and dove into the starry sky pond. Just like before, the entire starry sky rapidly enlarged in his field of vision. By the time Lu Yi came to his senses, he had already left the soul race's ancestral land. In the unknown starry sky, Lu Yi looked around and found that there was nothing but a few desolate stars and dead stars nearby. Not only was there no decent realm, but there was also not a single person in sight. Which direction should he go? He also didn't know how far the yin-yang great millstone was from here. After pondering for a moment, he decided that he could only take one step at a time. It would be best if he could find a realm or a cultivator to ask. He summoned the star boat and chose a direction at random. Lu Yi looked around to see if he could meet anyone while using the rainbow divine lotus in his divine sea to connect to the soul race's ancestral land. Soon he found that as he moved further and further away from where he had just appeared, the connection between the rainbow divine lotus in his divine sea and the ancestral land was clearly weakening. After only an hour, Lu Yi felt that the connection between the rainbow divine lotus and the ancestral land had weakened to the point that it couldn't open a passage to the ancestral land. This meant that even with the help of the rainbow divine lotus, he couldn't enter the soul race's ancestral land. Sure enough, this method of entering the soul race's ancestral land had a lot of restrictions. He had to be in a specific location and he couldn't make too much of a mistake. However, this wasn't a big deal. There should be a lot of such specific locations in the starry sky. If he really wanted to enter the soul race's ancestral land, He would only need to use his Rainbow Divine Lotus to constantly change his position and determine whether the connection was weakening or strengthening. Then he would be able to find a suitable location. It would just take him some time and effort. Since Li Shang could do it, he could do it too. His journey was calm and peaceful. Half a day later, he finally sensed the sounds of battle from afar. Judging from the sounds, one of them was obviously caused by the spiritual power of a cultivator. Overjoyed, he hastily steered the star boat in that direction. Soon he saw two figures. They were a man and a woman. One was at the late constellation realm, while the other was at the middle constellation realm. At this moment they were working together to kill a rat-like star beast. However, this rat-like star beast was really big enough. Just its body alone was 50 feet long. Its entire body was covered in starlight, and its aura was ferocious. It looked like it was not to be trifled with. Lu Yi stopped far away. He only came over to ask for directions and didn't want to be misunderstood by others. The man and woman who were currently fighting with the star beast clearly saw Lu Ye's arrival too. Their originally ferocious attacks suddenly withdrew. They were clearly on guard. But after seeing Lu Yi stop far away and take the initiative to reveal his late-stage constellation realm cultivation, the two of them set their minds at ease again. Generally speaking, doing things like Lu Ye's was expressing that he had no ill intentions. This was also the most correct behavior when unfamiliar cultivators met in the starry sky. Without any worries, the male and female cultivators immediately exerted their strength and killed the star beast on the spot very quickly. Leaving the woman to deal with it, the male cultivator rushed over to Lu Ye's side. Lu Yi also went over to greet him. When he got close, Lu Yi bowed first and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." The other party returned the bow, sized Lu Yi up and down, and opened his mouth to ask, "What's the matter, fellow Taoist?" Lu Yi was clearly waiting for them here for something. Lu Yi said, "I want to ask where that Yin-Yang Great Millstone is. If fellow Taoist can point it out, I'll be very grateful." When the male cultivator heard that, only then did he understand that Lu Yi was just asking for directions. This was a small matter, as easy as lifting a finger. He naturally did not mind giving some pointers. He immediately pointed out a direction to Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked in that direction and gave his thanks. He was just about to hurry on his way when that female cultivator walked over and asked, "Fellow Taoist isn't from this galaxy?" Lu Yi said honestly, "I passed by this place and specially made a trip to rush to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone." The female cultivator understood and flicked a jade slip at Lu Yi with a finger. "This is the star chart of this galaxy, including the direction of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. Take it, fellow Taoist. With the star chart imprinting the celestial bodies, it won't be easy to get lost." Lu Yi received it and checked it briefly. He discovered that this was indeed a star chart. Furthermore, as the female cultivator said, it included the location of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. He thanked sincerely, "Many thanks, fellow Taoist. You've helped me greatly." The female cultivator pursed her lips into a smile. "It's just a small matter." Lu Yi quickly left, checking the star chart as he moved forward. From the star chart, this galaxy was called the Cave Void Galaxy. If he wanted to go to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, he would have to pass through the Cave Void Galaxy and arrive at the barren galaxy where this starry sky wonder was located. Helplessly he was back again. Before he was hospitalized, his child suddenly developed a wheat lump, and his eyes were swollen. He could not be operated on. Therefore the original operation was cancelled, and he had to make a new appointment. Tears, he had already made 2 trips. Chapter 1667. According to Lu Ye's original plan, after sending Li Shang back to the ancestral land, he would return to the Wanxiang Galaxy and use a bug path to reach a place called the Three Saints Galaxy. Then he would pass through the Three Saints Galaxy to reach the Dongsu Galaxy. If he really went this way, it would definitely take a lot of time. Coming from the ancestral land of the Soul Clan, but going directly to the Dongsu Galaxy, the difference between the two was obvious. However, the Dongsu Galaxy. Lu Yi vaguely felt that it sounded familiar. After thinking about it carefully, he remembered that when he and Tang Jun accidentally wandered to the Wanxiang Galaxy, they once asked someone for information. At that time they met a cultivator from the Dongsu Galaxy who claimed to be from the ancient Cold Realm. Moreover, there seemed to be a Dongsu Island on the Wanxiang Sea. To be able to occupy a spiritual island in a place like the Wanxiang Sea, the native forces of the Dongsu Galaxy should not be weak. At the very least they should have Rizhao. In such an unfamiliar place, Lu Yi naturally would not act too ostentatiously. He sailed alone and quietly moved forward. According to the star map, with his current speed, he would be able to leave the Dongsu galaxy and enter the barren star field in a month. However, after reaching there, he still had to hurry for a while to reach the location of the Yinyang Great Millstone. While hurrying, Lu Yi did not idle. He divided his attention to condense his own precious blood. He now had 3 drops of precious blood, but this thing had many uses, so naturally, the more the better. Lu Yi could feel that with his current strength, it was becoming more and more difficult to condense more precious blood. This might have something to do with his own foundation. However, while hurrying, he had nothing to do, so he could only condense precious blood. It was a peaceful journey. After a month, Lu Yi checked the star map in his hand and indeed walked out of the Dongsu galaxy. The star map that the woman had given him before was not of much use here, because the star map only included the Dongsu galaxy and did not have signs outside the galaxy. However, since he had arrived here and had a general direction, Lu Yi felt that it should not be difficult for him to find the Yinyang Great Millstone. After all, this space wonder was said to be very large and could be seen from afar. In fact, as early as a few days ago, Lu Yi had already felt the desolation of the nearby space. This desolation was not only because there were no signs of human habitation, there were no traces of the existence of a domain. Even the space energy that one could normally feel in the space was thinner than ordinary places. This situation became more obvious the further they went. Lu Yi faintly guessed that this was related to the Yinyang Great Millstone. This starry sky wonder had been slowly growing. Since it was growing, it naturally needed nutrients. Just like how plants couldn't live without water and sunlight, the growth of the starry sky wonder couldn't live without starry sky energy. The reason why it was so thin was because it had been devoured by the Yinyang Millstone. Therefore, in theory, as long as Lu Yi followed these traces, he could easily find the Yinyang Great Millstone. From the looks of it, the future of the K-Void galaxy was bleak. If the Yinyang Millstone continued to grow, it would sooner or later swallow up the territory of the K-Void galaxy. Not only the K-Void galaxy but all the galaxies in the vicinity of this space wonder would suffer, unless there was some mighty force that could change the situation. But who could stop the growth of a space wonder? It wasn't a big problem right now, but what about thousands, tens of thousands, or tens of thousands of years later? This was not something that Lu Yi needed to worry about. It was just that he had suddenly thought of this. There was sunlight in the K-Void. This was something that they should be worried about. After entering the barren star area, they traveled steadily for another half a month. One day, Lu Yi was concentrating on refining his precious blood. Suddenly, he frowned and looked ahead. The speed of the star boat also decreased rapidly. Soon it came to a stop. Although there was nothing in front of him, he still felt that something was not quite right. Looking carefully, he didn't find anything unusual. However, the feeling of uneasiness didn't disappear. He activated his spiritual energy. Immediately, his eyes were covered with complicated and mysterious patterns, which enhanced his insight. In the next moment, Lu Ye's face froze. That was because, with the enhancement of the insight inferred by the talent tree, he vaguely saw a huge shadow in front of him. That shadow was in the shape of a sphere, which covered a large area of the starry sky. The formation. Someone had set up a grand formation here. Moreover, the person who had set up the formation had a high attainment in the formation Tao. Therefore, although he had sensed something strange at first, he couldn't find any clues. Even now, with the enhancement of the insight inscriptions, he couldn't see much. He could only confirm that the vast area of the starry sky in front of him was covered by an inexplicable grand formation. Without even thinking, Lu Yi hurriedly drove the star boat to turn around and run. No matter what this formation was or who had set it up, it was always a good idea to run away from it. Fortunately, he had sensed something. Otherwise, if he had run into it and alarmed the person who had set it up, the situation would have been worse. Only Yu Yao could set up such a grand formation, and not just any ordinary Yu Yao at that. However, as soon as he moved, the void behind him suddenly rippled. Then, a palm shadow appeared out of nowhere and grabbed at Lu Yi like it was grabbing a chicken. The palm shadow was huge and it was formed purely by magic power. Sensing the fierce fluctuations in the palm shadow, Lu Ye's expression turned cold, because he sensed that the one who had attacked him was actually a late-stage Yu Yao. Although he had killed Ri Ri and several Yu Yao before, those were all exceptions under special circumstances, and basically couldn't be repeated. Whether it was killing Ri Ri or Yu Yao, they weren't the embodiment of his true strength. Every time there was too much luck involved. Now that he suddenly encountered a late-stage Yu Yao, how could Lu Yi be a match for her? The starry sky was indeed dangerous. Even though he wasn't a newcomer and had been wandering the starry sky for many years, he still felt weak and powerless. The palm shadow grabbed at him, covering the sky and hiding the earth. The fierce fluctuations of magic power even made Lu Yi feel as if he was being crushed by a mountain. Even the trajectory of the star boat showed signs of slowing down. Although the star boat was much faster than a cultivator flying on foot, no matter how good the star boat was, it still needed a period of time to increase its speed. Caught off guard, Lu Yi knew that it was impossible for him to escape with the star boat. He immediately put away the spirit boat, circulated his spiritual power, and executed a leaping technique. The leaping technique he had inherited from Yanxi could not only be used in battle, but also had a great advantage in escaping, especially in a situation like this. His figure flashed, narrowly passing through the gaps between the fingers of the palm shadow. "Oh!" A slightly surprised voice rang out. Clearly she didn't expect that she, a late-stage Yu Yao, would fail to capture a constellation in the first place. However, as soon as the voice rang out, the palm shadow suddenly flipped over. At this moment, Lu Yi was about to detonate his precious blood and activate the blood escape technique of the blood clan to escape this place. Although precious blood was precious, he couldn't care less about it at this moment. If he wanted to leave this place, the blood escape technique of the blood clan was his top priority. This technique was extremely fast and he might have a chance to escape this dangerous place. However, before he could detonate his precious blood, as the palm shadow flipped over, Lu Ye's mind turned upside down. That palm shadow seemed to have the power to overturn the heavens and the earth. In that instant, Lu Yi regained his senses. However, it was already too late for him to detonate his precious blood. The palm shadow closed and suddenly shrank, turning into a huge net that firmly trapped him. Lu Yi felt that his spiritual power was suppressed in his body, and he couldn't circulate it at all. His heart sank. This time it's over. He couldn't circulate his spiritual power, and he couldn't even use his strongest trump card, the red talisman. The starry sky was too dangerous. The constellations were still too weak. Lu Yi felt somewhat melancholic. However, he didn't panic because he didn't feel any killing intent from the person who had attacked him. The other party was a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator. If they really wanted to kill him, they wouldn't have done what they did just now. Trapped in the huge net of transcendence energy, Lu Yi was dragged towards the place he had sensed was covered by a formation. After a moment, he seemed to crash into an invisible barrier. His vision cleared, and his surroundings were completely different from what he had seen before. However, before Lu Yi could take a look, he was dragged to a place, and the net of transcendence energy that bound him disappeared. Lu Yi didn't dare to act rashly because an extremely powerful divine sense had locked onto him. He looked up and saw a sinister-looking old man standing not far away, staring at him coldly. The old man had white hair and wore a black robe. He didn't seem to be anything special, but the power fluctuations on his body undoubtedly showed that he was a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator. The one who had attacked Lu Yi just now was undoubtedly this old man. There were a few other figures around the old man, but what made Lu Yi frown slightly was that these figures' identities were very complicated. There were humans like him, Yen clan members whose bodies were covered in flames, demon clan members whose bodies were shrouded in demonic chi, and there was even a giant who was 10 feet tall. Lu Yi even saw insect clan members mixed in with them. This combination was undoubtedly very strange. Lu Yi turned his head to look at his surroundings and was startled as he realized what kind of people he had encountered. A pirate gang. This was a gang that specialized in raiding and robbing in the starry sky, and would even plunder domains. They were lawless, committing all kinds of crimes. In fact, there were embryonic forms of pirate gangs in the myriad phenomenon galaxy. These people formed groups of 3 to 5 and raided outside, but because of the constraints of the environment, these people only gathered in small groups, so they could only be regarded as embryonic forms. They didn't dare to raise their banners and only acted in secret. But in the real starry sky, these pirate gangs were rampant. Generally speaking, the origins of the members of pirate gangs were extremely complicated, and they were basically all criminals. Apart from pirate gangs, Lu Yi found it hard to believe that there was any other gang in the world with such a complicated composition. He had actually encountered a pirate gang and he had even been captured by them. If the other party had used that kind of transcendence energy net to bind him, then Lu Yi really wouldn't have been able to resist. However, the other party had seen that he wasn't very strong and had clearly let down their guard. At this moment, he already had the ability to activate the red talisman. However, there were signs of activating the red talisman. The other party was a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator, so Lu Yi wasn't confident that he could kill her in one strike. The methods of pirate gangs were very cruel. The other party had only captured him but not killed him. Moreover, this pirate gang had come to this place and even set up a large formation to conceal this vast starry sky. What were they trying to do? Lu Yi had many questions in his mind, but at this moment he only wanted to find a way to escape. End of chapter. Chapter 1668. It only took a moment for Lu Yi to figure out his current situation. At this moment he was on a starship that looked like a tower ship. This was obviously a starship belonging to a pirate gang. Lu Yi thought to himself. If he took out the red talisman now, even if he couldn't kill this late-stage Yu Yao, he should be able to cause her to panic for a while. He might even be able to take advantage of this opportunity to escape. As long as there was a moment of confusion, he could activate the blood escape technique of the blood race, and ordinary Yu Yao might not be able to catch up to him. The only troublesome thing was the large formation set up around him. That formation had the effect of concealment, so it might be able to protect him. It would be awkward if he couldn't escape from the range of the formation after activating the red talisman. You know about formations? The old man suddenly asked while Lu Yi was thinking. He had obviously asked this because he saw Lu Ye's performance just now. If one didn't know about formations, they wouldn't have been able to detect the abnormality in advance. Lu Yi had obviously seen the traces of a formation just now, which was why he had turned around and fled. I know a little, Lu Yi replied indifferently. You're pretty strong too. The old man looked Lu Yi up and down and smiled meaningfully. Kid, do you want to live or die? What a question. Who would want to die if they could live? Very good. The old man grinned, his appearance somewhat sinister. If you want to live, then perform well. If you perform well, this old man can spare your life. Even if you want to join this old man's Divine Wind group, it's not impossible. The Divine Wind group was undoubtedly the name of this pirate gang. Lu Yi naturally had no interest in joining the Divine Wind group, but at this moment, he had no choice but to show his desire to live. Please tell me. Seeing that Lu Yi was so tactful, the cultivators around the old man chuckled, looking at him as if he were a smart kid. The old man shot a meaningful glance at Yu Yao from the Flame Clan. The Flame Clan member immediately stepped forward and slapped Lu Yi on the shoulder, dragging him to the side of the ship. He pointed in a certain direction and said, "Brat, look over there." Lu Yi endured the burning sensation on his shoulder and looked in the direction the old man was pointing. His expression froze slightly. This was because there was a realm in that direction. This was a little strange because this was the desolate astral region. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any realms here. Basically, there were only desolate stars, dead stars and floating continents. However, it was indeed a realm, but it gave Lu Yi the feeling that it was a very low-level realm. There were no intelligent life forms in the realm, and there was very little vegetation. In the starry skies, there were many such low-level domains, so Lu Yi was not surprised. However, at this moment the entire domain was in turmoil. Astonishing energy fluctuations could be seen erupting from many places. There were even a few tiger shark warships cruising outside the realm, constantly launching terrifying attacks. Under these attacks, the entire domain was like a candle flame in a storm. It was on the verge of collapse and many parts of it had been shattered. Go, destroy that realm and you'll be a member of the Divine Wind group. Yu Yao from the Yen clan slapped Lu Yi on the back. A powerful force pushed Lu Yi towards the boundary zone. Lu Yi finally understood why the Divine Wind group had captured him alive instead of killing him. It was obvious that they wanted him to be their coolie. However, what was so special about this realm that the Divine Wind group was willing to destroy it without hesitation? They even set up a concealment formation before attacking. Lu Yi had a vague feeling that there was some secret in this place, but he wasn't in the mood to investigate it. He followed Yu Yao's power and flew forward while thinking of a way to escape. He couldn't act rashly before breaking the other party's formation. Now that things had come to this, he could only wait and see. A realm devoid of life forms like this could give birth to life forms in the future, but considering that this was the desolate astral region where the Yin-Yang Great Millstone was located, it was likely that the Yin-Yang Great Millstone would expand here before the realm could give birth to any life forms. Lu Yi soon arrived at the realm. When he sensed it up close, he was even more certain that this was a very low-level realm. There were no native life forms in the entire realm, and there were very few plants. He randomly chose a place to land. He wanted to dawdle, but he could clearly feel a strand of divine sense watching him. Needless to say, it was the Yen clan's Yu Yao. Lu Yi had no choice but to draw his mountain coiling saber. He channeled his spiritual power into the saber and slashed down. Saber light swept out like a waterfall and slammed into the ground, causing the earth to tremble. A low-level realm like this couldn't withstand too much damage. The Divine Wind Group had mobilized a large number of cultivators this time, as well as several Tiger Shark battleships. Lu Yi didn't use his full strength. He only displayed the strength of a typical late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator. Even so, he felt that this realm would shatter in 2 or 3 days. And this was before the other party's Yu Yao made a move. If the other party's Yu Yao made a move, it would only be faster. No matter what the Divine Wind Group's goal was, Lu Yi felt that he had to think of a way to escape before the realm shattered. In truth, directly promoting Yu Yao wasn't necessarily a bad idea. His physique had been tempered to the extreme, and his cultivation had reached a point where it couldn't advance any further. He could definitely promote Yu Yao. As long as his cultivation reached Yu Yao, Lu Yi was confident that even if he couldn't defeat that late-stage Yu Yao old man, escaping from him wouldn't be a problem. However, promoting Yu Yao wasn't something that could be done overnight. With the other party's close attention, there was no way he could do so. Moreover, Lu Yi didn't want to promote just like that. Even though he knew that the Yin-Yang Great Millstone was used to temper his body, with the reincarnation tree's instructions, Lu Yi felt that he would miss out on something if he didn't make a trip to check out the situation. With all kinds of thoughts in his mind, his movements were sluggish. Just as he was about to slash out a second time, a familiar voice suddenly rang out beside his ear. "Young friend, why are you here?" Lu Yi was startled. He hurriedly looked around but he didn't see anything. There was no one around at all. But why does this voice sound a little familiar? Just as he was feeling paranoid, the voice rang out again. "Young friend, come in quickly." "And where?" Just as Lu Yi was feeling puzzled, the void in front of him suddenly rippled. Then a door abruptly appeared. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment. Then, without any hesitation, he barged into the door. At the same time, on the Divine Wind Regiment's ship, the old man who had sensed something, suddenly turned into a streak of light and rushed toward where Lu Yi had been. He arrived in the blink of an eye. However, he was still a step too late. By the time he arrived, the door Lu Yi had passed through had already disappeared. Yu Yao from the Yin tribe had also arrived. He had been watching Lu Yi all this time, so he naturally knew what had happened. At this moment, his eyes shone brightly. "My lord, there really is a secret realm hidden here." Before the door appeared, he hadn't noticed anything amiss. He also didn't know if there were any benefits in this place. Everything had been ordered by the old man. He was just following orders. The old man said indifferently, "My judgment is naturally not wrong. However, that human brat was actually taken in. This was a little strange. They were destroying the realm here, trying to force the creature hiding here to show itself. The creature had been ignoring them all this time. Who would have thought that it would be exposed because of a human brat? Was there something special about the other party? It couldn't be that they knew each other. If that was the case, it would be too much of a coincidence." The old man sneered. "Pass down my orders. Increase the intensity of the attacks. I want this realm destroyed in 2 days." "Yes." Yu Yao from the Yin tribe accepted the order and quickly passed it down. The Divine Wind Regiment's attacks became even more ferocious. At this time, Lu Yi had arrived at a secret realm through the door that had suddenly appeared. As far as the eye could see, there was a sea of flowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was incomparably gorgeous. Above the sea of flowers, there were also many giant mushrooms and towering trees scattered about. Disregarding the sea of flowers, Lu Yi felt that the giant mushrooms were somewhat familiar. He had clearly seen them somewhere before. Looking up, 2 huge silhouettes came into view. Lu Yi looked at them and was momentarily dazed. "It really is you two?" Of the 2 giant figures, one looked like an old tree that had turned into a spirit. Extremely pure wood energy swirled around its body, giving it a feeling of vitality. The other figure next to it was in no way inferior. However, it wore a mushroom hat on its head that looked like a giant open umbrella. These 2 big fellows were the patriarch of the Wood Spirit tribe, Mu He, and the patriarch of the Spore tribe, Black Umbrella. Under the guidance of the reincarnation tree, Lu Yi had gone to the Blue Jade world to help them resolve the threat of extinction. Later, he had even brought them to move into the reincarnation tree's tree world. However, because the reincarnation tree's tree world could only accept living beings at the Divine Sea realm and below, the 2-star mansions of the 2 tribes had embarked on the journey to find a new home. Since then, Lu Yi had not seen them again. Naturally, he did not know what their situation was. He had never imagined that they would meet again in a place like this. However, the feeling that they gave Lu Yi was different. Now, whether it was Mu He or Black Umbrella, they had both advanced to Yu Yao. The aura emanating from them was clearly Yu Yao's. The one who had spoken to Lu Yi just now was undoubtedly Mu He. "Young friend, we meet again." Mu He smiled faintly. Black Umbrella also greeted him from the side. Lu Yi nodded. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw another figure flash out from behind Mu He. He was immediately surprised. Why are you here?" The figure who had flashed out from behind Mu He was a woman. More importantly, Lu Yi recognized her. Back then, she had set up a stall in the scattered market on the island of all manifestations. Later, Lu Yi had recruited her to the Peerless Island. She was Hua Qianying, who had disappeared some time ago. When the three-world island had first taken shape, Lu Yi had gone to find her. He wanted to rope her into the three-world island and teach Hua Xiai and senior sister Shui Yuan about alchemy. In the end, he did not find her. Even when he sent a message through the sound talisman, there was no reply. Lu Yi guessed that Hua Qianying must have left the Wanxiang Sea. At that time he had felt that it was a pity. He had never thought that he would see her again here. End of chapter. Chapter 1669. Wood Spirit Race Patriarch Mu He, Spore Race Patriarch He Fan, and Hua Qianying. Lu Yi was surprised that the three of them had gathered together. Hua Qianying looked at Lu Yi in confusion. "Why are you with them?" She hadn't interacted with Lu Yi many times, but she could feel that Lu Yi wasn't a bad person. Therefore she couldn't understand why Lu Yi was with those pirates. Those guys outside weren't good people. "I'm ashamed to say this." Lu Yi gave a brief account of what had happened to him. In truth, it was all down to his bad luck. He was on his way when he encountered such an incident. By the time he realized that something was wrong, it was already too late for him to escape. He was caught and thrown here as a coolie. If it weren't for these three in front of him, he would still be outside thinking of a way to escape. Hua Qianying nodded slightly. "I see." She felt that Lu Yi couldn't be a bad person and wouldn't be reduced to a galactic pirate. So there was a reason for this. What's with this secret realm? Lu Yi was surprised. He was sure that this was a secret realm, but he couldn't detect any traces of it from the outside. If these three hadn't taken the initiative to open the door and let him in, he wouldn't have known that there was a secret realm here. "And you three, why are you here? Is this the new home of the Wood Spirit Race and the Spore Race?" Lu Yi had many questions. Mu He said, "You could say that, but this is actually the home of the Flower Race." "Flower Race?" Lu Yi murmured, then turned to look at Hua Qianying and suddenly realized, "You're from the Flower Race?" Hua Qianying nodded slightly, admitting it. Lu Yi showed a look of understanding. "I see." He was wondering why Hua Qianying's alchemy skills were so good, so she was from the Flower Race. The various races in the universe all had their own unique abilities, but the Flower Race was best at cultivating flowers and plants. It could be said that the spirit flowers and plants cultivated by them were far superior in quality and efficacy. Moreover, the Flower Race was a race rich in alchemists because they had a natural understanding of spirit flowers and plants, so they naturally had a unique advantage in alchemy. It could be said that every member of the Flower Race was an excellent alchemist. In the universe, although the Flower Race wasn't as rare as the Soul Race or the Mermaid Race, it wasn't a large race. Moreover, because their general combat strength was relatively low, they generally relied on other powerful races to survive. Those powerful races were very welcoming to rely on the Flower Race. After all, which cultivator didn't need spirit pills for cultivation? With the Flower Race as logistic support, the efficiency of cultivation would increase? As for why we are here, Mu He recounted the story of how they had separated from Lu Yi. Back then, the Flower Race, the Flower Race, the Flower Race, and the remaining Flower Races began their journey to find a new home. The Flower Race was the Flower Race and the races because they could race, and the race was to easily was. They searched for a long time along the way but were unable to find a domain suitable for survival. Even though they had tried their best to hide their whereabouts, they were still targeted by people who wanted to move around in the starry sky. They encountered several large and small battles and a number of their clansmen died. There weren't many Flower Races members in the first place, and now they were even fewer. Until one day they met a Flower Race. Under the Flower Race's guidance, they came to this realm and entered this mystic realm. Only then did they settle down. If other races were in trouble, even if the Flower Tribe encountered them, they would not interfere. After all, they were not a powerful race. However, the Wood Spirits and the Spore Tribe were different. These two races were naturally close to the Flower Tribe. That was why the Flower Tribe member who met Mu He and Black Umbrella had given them advice. With a specific goal in mind, Mu-He and Black Umbrella led the rest of the flower race and went through many hardships before finally arriving here. Later, with the help of the flower race, Mu-He and Black Umbrella advanced to Yu Yao's level. Unfortunately, good times didn't last. This place was soon targeted by a group of space pirates. Then Lu Yi listened quietly. He felt that the flower race and the flower race's fates were really rough. Then he thought of the mermaid race and the soul race. He suddenly realized that these rare races with strange abilities had it really hard to survive in the universe. They were often targeted by strong people. It was really a case of an innocent man getting into trouble because of his wealth. In fact, Lu Yi wanted to guide Mu-He and Black Umbrella to lead the flower race to Kyushu. Whether it was the flower race or the flower race, they all had some strange abilities. They were few in number, so Kyushu welcomed them. But because the journey was too far, he didn't mention it. The pirates outside are targeting the flower race? Lu Yi asked. Capturing a rare race like the flower race and selling them was undoubtedly a good way for some pirate groups to get rich. Just like when Li Shang was captured and sold at an auction. If Lu Yi didn't go bankrupt to buy her, who knows what would happen to her now. Li Shang was captured because of bad luck. Not long after he left the Spirita's ancestral land, he met Rizhao. Against Rizhao there was no room for resistance. The flower race's situation was different. The pirates outside had their eyes on them. Hua Qianing heard this and shook her head bitterly. They're not only targeting us, they're targeting the secret territory itself. In other words, the secret territory itself was what the pirates wanted. Although the flower race was valuable in terms of value, it couldn't be compared to the secret territory. Even if there were 1,000 or 10,000 flower race members, it wouldn't be enough. They want to take over the secret territory? Lu Yi didn't understand. He looked around to see what was so special about the secret territory. When he came in, he just took a quick look. He didn't check it carefully. Now that he sensed it carefully, he found that the secret territory's environment was very good. There were a lot of spirit flowers and plants. Aside from the flower race and the flower race, there were hundreds of flower race members living here. But these flower race members weren't very strong. Hua Qianing was considered strong among them. However, the mystic realm itself could already be compared to an ordinary large realm. If Lu Yi didn't know that this was a secret territory, he would have thought that this was another realm. Also, he could feel that there was a special power in this secret territory that was very suitable for growing spirit flowers and plants. But why would the Divine Wind Pirates go through so much trouble to take over this secret territory? This place was considered the outer edge of the K-Void galaxy. It could be seen from their sneaky actions. They didn't dare to expose themselves so that they wouldn't be seen by the powerhouses of the K-Void galaxy. So even if they took over this secret territory, they couldn't occupy it for a long time. This place was not safe for the pirates. Unless there was something special about this secret territory that could attract them. Hua Qianing wanted to say something but stopped. Obviously, she didn't know if she should tell Lu Yi some secrets. Mu-He said, "It's okay. Little friend Lu is valued by the reincarnation tree and was given the reincarnation tree's mark. His character is trustworthy." Hua Qianing was shocked and looked at Lu Yi in surprise. "You were given the reincarnation tree's mark?" Black Umbrella also explained, "Didn't I tell you before that the blue jade world we live in was invaded by the blood race? The reincarnation tree sent little friend Lu to save us." The two clansmen did tell Hua Qianing about this, but she didn't expect that the person who saved the two clans would be Lu Yi. Hua Qianing was a little confused. "Aren't you called Li Taibai?" In her mind, Lu Yi was Li Taibai of the Peerless Island. But the two clan leaders called him Little Friend Lu. Lu Yi scratched his face. An alias. Hua Qianing understood. When cultivators went out, it was common for them to use an alias to hide their identity. But since he was valued by the reincarnation tree and was given the reincarnation tree's mark, his character was indeed trustworthy. She didn't have any worries and slowly explained, "The home of the flower race is indeed a secret territory, but it's actually the inner space of a divine object." Divine object? Lu Yi looked curious. "The World King Flower. Have you heard of it?" Hua Qianing asked. Lu Yi shook his head. Although he had wandered the starry sky for some years and had seen and experienced a lot, there were too many strange things in the starry sky. He naturally couldn't be omniscient. Rumor has it that the World King Flower is the origin of our flower clan. The first flower clan was born in the flower world of the World King Flower. In this world, wherever there is a World King Flower, there will be flower clan. Our flower clan was born in the flower world of a World King Flower. Lu Yi looked around and was slightly surprised. So this secret territory is the World King Flower's World King Flower? Yes. Hua Qianning nodded. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, but I didn't find any World King Flowers outside. Does it have the ability to hide? It doesn't hide. Hua Qianning shook her head. It attaches. When the World King Flower was born, it attached itself to the outside world. The World King Flower is a very strange divine object. It attaches itself to a certain world and absorbs the world's resources to strengthen itself. Lu Yi reacted. Is it like a parasite? It's not a simple parasite. Hua Qianning shook her head. Generally, parasites only bring harm to the host, but the World King Flower is different. When the World King Flower attaches itself to a certain world and absorbs the world's resources to strengthen itself, it will produce a mysterious power that can help improve the world's resources and greatly shorten the time it takes for the world to grow. The relationship between the two is not a simple matter of one side taking advantage of the other, but rather they complement each other. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. There is such a divine object in this world? He frowned and said, but if that's the case, then the world outside shouldn't have such a low foundation. The world outside gave off a feeling of malnutrition. Was this not because of the World King Flower's parasitic absorption? Hua Qianning said, since fellow Taoist has come here, you must know that this place is special. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. End of chapter. Chapter 1670. It's the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. Hua Qianning revealed a helpless expression. Without this space wonder, even if the realm outside didn't become a large realm, it wouldn't have only a simple life force and would have given birth to life. However, because of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, the realm outside is like what fellow Taoist sees. The Yin-Yang Great Millstone was constantly growing, and the nutrients for its growth were absorbing everything around it. Although the realm outside was still some distance away from the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, it still couldn't resist the influence of the space wonder. It could even be said that without the support of the World King Flower, the realm outside wouldn't even have a simple life force anymore. It was precisely because of the support of the World King Flower that the realm didn't completely turn into a dead star or a desolate star. At present, the realm could still maintain a simple life force, but as the Yin-Yang Great Millstone continued to expand, it would fall sooner or later, and it probably wouldn't take many years. It seemed that the World King Flower was indeed very helpful to the growth of a realm. One had to know that this was already a desolate star field, and there were only dead stars, desolate stars and shattered floating continents. The World King Flowers help could offset the influence of the space wonder like the Yin-Yang Great Millstone to some extent. Lu Yi immediately realized the power of this divine object. If he were to obtain such a divine object and sell it, not to mention the attitude of the top realms, those large realms would probably go crazy over it. Who didn't want their realm to be promoted to a top realm as soon as possible? However, the promotion of a realm's foundation wasn't as simple as the cultivation of a cultivator. It took a long time to accumulate. However, if he had the World King Flower attached to him, he would be able to greatly reduce the time required to do so. It wasn't until now that Lu Yi understood what Hua Qianning meant when she said that the Divine Wind Pirate Gang valued this divine object more than anything else. Compared to the flower race, the value of the World King Flower was immeasurable. If this thing could be obtained, the Divine Wind Pirate Gang could completely wash their hands of it. Even if they moved into a large realm, they would be treated as an honored guest. That being said, 9 provinces needed the World King Flower. The 9 regions had just been promoted to a large domain not long ago. Although there was the heritage of the blood-refining world and the Wushuang continent to devour, even if they devoured these 2 domains, the 9 regions was still far from being promoted to a top domain. The only advantage of the 9 regions was Little 9. Because of the existence of Little 9, the 9 regions was a domain that could grow rapidly. Looking at the entire starry sky, there were not many domains like the 9 regions. Otherwise, Sunshine wouldn't have been so happy back then. A realm that could rapidly grow, and if it also had the assistance of the World King Flower. Lu Yi didn't dare to imagine how beautiful the scene would be. His mind couldn't help but become active. However, when he thought of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang outside, he felt a headache coming on. The Divine Wind Pirate Gang wasn't too strong, but they had a late-stage Yu Yao. This was something that Lu Yi couldn't contend with at the moment. After thinking for a while, Lu Yi asked, the pirate gangs outside are trying to destroy the sector. If the sector is destroyed, how will the Sector King Flower be affected? According to Hua Qianning, the Sector King flower attached itself to the sector like a parasite, but it wasn't. Lu Yi didn't know how the destruction of the Sector King flower would affect the Sector King flower, but he was certain that it wouldn't be a good thing. Hua Qianying said, once the Sector King flower attaches itself to a sector, it can no longer be separated. Without our flower race opening the door, no one can enter. If you want to separate it, there is only one way. Destroy the Sector King flower attaches itself to. Lu Yi understood. It seemed that the Divine Wind Pirate Gang had somehow learned of the existence of the Sector King flower here and knew how to separate it from the Sector King flower. That was why they destroyed the Sector King flower. Once the Sector King flower was destroyed, the Sector King flower would be revealed. At that time, it would naturally be taken away. Speaking of this, Hua Qianying revealed a sad expression. In fact, even if the pirate gangs outside didn't destroy the Sector King flower, our original plan was to find a way to destroy it. The Yin-Yang Great Millstone continues to expand, and the Sector King flower's reverse nourishment can no longer maintain the vitality of the Sector King flower for too long. Once the vitality of the Sector King flower withers, the Sector King flower's flower realm will also suffer heavy losses. Therefore, the only way out for this branch of the flower race was to destroy their own realm before these things happened, take away the World King flower, and find another place to settle down. They didn't have high requirements for the Sector King flower. As long as the environment wasn't too bad, the Sector King flower could help them grow quickly. Then why haven't we done anything? Lu Yi asked. Hua Qianying said bitterly, we don't have enough strength. If we want to take away the Sector King flower, we need powerful spiritual energy because the Sector King flower isn't a physical object. It's an existence that is both virtual and real. Apart from attaching itself to the Sector King flower, it can only be taken into the Divine Sea. I only have the constellation, and the Divine Sea isn't enough to carry the Sector King flower. If we forcefully take it away, the Divine Sea will probably collapse. This was also a headache for Hua Qianying's branch of the Hua clan. They were born from the World King flower's flower world, so their strength was closely related to the level of the World King flower's flower world. If not for the Yin-Yang millstone's constant devouring, the World King flower's flower world would have matured long ago. Hua Qianying's strength would not be as simple as a star constellation. But because of the Yin-Yang millstone, the World King flower's flower world could not grow. If the level of the flower world couldn't be raised, the cultivation of the flower race couldn't be raised. This was also the reason why Yu Yao hadn't been born in Hua Qianying's branch. Originally, when fellow Taoist Mu and fellow Taoist Black Umbrella managed to upgrade Yu Yao, we felt that this matter was very promising. However, after the two of you gave it a try, we discovered that it still wasn't possible. Mu He and Black Umbrella looked ashamed at the side. The flower tribe had taken them in and given them a place to stay. They had even helped them evolve Yu Yao. In the end, they hadn't been of any help at all. They really felt bad about this. In the end, it was because their spiritual energy wasn't strong enough. When I left the flower world for the 10,000 Elephant Sea, I wanted to find a trustworthy expert who could help us. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one. They couldn't rely on the flower race themselves. If the level of the flower realm didn't increase, the strongest flower race members born in the flower world would only be at the star constellation realm. This was the same logic as when the 9 states only had Divine Sea realm cultivators. Therefore, the flower race wanted to find a helper. However, according to Hua Qianying's estimations, only a late-stage Yu Yao would be able to collect the World King flower. She, a late-stage star constellation realm cultivator, had gone to a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea. She didn't have many connections to come into contact with such an expert. Moreover, even if she did, she wouldn't be able to determine their character. After wasting a few years in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, they had no choice but to return. However, not long after they returned, they encountered this crisis. Now that the realm was under attack, it would be broken in 2 or 3 days. When the World King flower appeared, the flower race's future would be bleak. The only solution they could think of now was to gather the flower race, the wood spirit race and the spore race. The moment the realm was broken, they would launch a counterattack and see if they could defeat the enemy. However, the enemy still had a late-stage Yu Yao and another early-stage Yu Yao. Even if Mu He and Black Umbrella had both become Yu Yao, they still wouldn't be a match for them. Moreover, there were several tiger shark warships outside eyeing them covetously. The power they could unleash was no different from a Yu Yao attacking. When the realm was broken, what awaited the 3 races was likely to be defeated and enslaved. Does collecting the World King flower require spiritual power? Lu Yi asked thoughtfully. Yes. Hua Qianying nodded. If she could become a Yu Yao with the special characteristics of her race and their connection to the World King Flower, collecting the World King Flower shouldn't be too much of a problem. However, she couldn't become a Yu Yao. Can I try? Lu Yi asked. Spiritual power. He was confident that it was much stronger than cultivators of the same cultivation level. After all, he hadn't eaten so many nourishing things to strengthen his spiritual power for nothing. However, Mu He and Black Umbrella had already tried, and it was to no avail. He didn't know how great the gap between his spiritual power and Mu He and Black Umbrella's, but since things had already gotten to this point, he could only try everything he could. If it worked, there was still a chance of survival. If it didn't work, then he could only fight to the death. Hua Qianying clearly understood this, so she didn't refuse Lu Ye's request. Of course you can. However, fellow Taoist, you must be careful. Although it's just a test, it's still extremely dangerous. If something goes wrong, please stop immediately. In truth, among all the people she had met in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, she had the best impression of Lu Yi. This was because Lu Yi was the only cultivator who had extended a helping hand to her during her years in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If Lu Yi had been a late-stage Yu Yao, she would have most likely asked Lu Yi for help. However, Lu Ye's cultivation level was the same as hers, only at the late-stage constellation realm, so she didn't mention it. Lu Yi nodded. What do I need to do? Wait a moment. Hua Qianying said, and soul power surged around her body. Soon, the entire flower realm started to tremble as if something was being born. Countless specks of fluorescent light flew over from all directions. Sensing this strange phenomenon, all the living beings in the flower realm turned their attention to it. Although the flower realm was large, there weren't many living beings in it. This was because the number of people from the 3 clans was very small to begin with. Even if they were scattered, there were less than 200 of them. Under Lu Ye's observation, the countless specks of fluorescent light gathered in front of Hua Qianying and quickly condensed into a flower. The flower was the size of a human head. It was pure white and spotless, and there wasn't anything out of the ordinary about it. However, this was one of the most valuable treasures in the starry sky, the projection of the World King Flower. The real World King Flower was still attached to the realm. As long as the realm wasn't broken, the real World King Flower wouldn't appear. So what appeared in front of Lu Yi at this moment was only a projection. Although it was only a projection, it was the condensation of the World King Flower's origin. It wouldn't be easy for Lu Yi to collect it. Correspondingly, if Lu Yi could collect this projection, it meant that he had the ability to collect the World King Flower. Hua Qianying said, Fellow Taoist, you can use your soul power to refine it as if it's a treasure. See if you can collect it in your divine sea. Lu Yi nodded and used the same method. His soul power surged and wrapped around the projection of the World King Flower. End of chapter. Chapter 1671. Because he knew that even Mu He and Black Umbrella had failed, Lu Yi didn't dare to be careless. However, to his surprise, it wasn't too difficult to refine. Lu Yi felt that it was easy to refine this projection. Mu He kindly reminded, when Brother Black Umbrella and I refined it before, we didn't encounter too many difficulties, but when we put it into the divine sea, it consumed a terrifying amount of soul power. Little friend, be careful. If you feel that something is wrong, let go immediately. Don't force it. When he put this projection into the divine sea, the entire divine sea shook violently and his soul power was almost drained. It was almost like he had walked through the gates of hell. Black Umbrella's experience was similar. Got it? Lu Yi nodded and carefully put the projection in front of him into the divine sea. During this process, whether it was Hua Qianying, Mu He, or Black Umbrella, they were all watching nervously. In the next moment, the projection disappeared. Lu Ye's expression turned cold because he noticed that the moment he put the projection in, the divine sea shook violently. Even the suppression of the soul-suppressing pagoda was useless. The entire divine sea was like a tsunami erupting. The sea rolled over and over and monstrous waves rose and fell. If that was all, Lu Yi could barely hold on, but what made him even more shocked was that after the projection of the World King Flower was put into the divine sea, it was crazily devouring his soul power. With this devouring, the projection of the World King Flower also began to shake violently, as if it was about to break away from his divine sea. Hua Qianying had been paying attention to his situation. Seeing this, he knew that the situation was not good and immediately said, "Don't continue." Lu Yi nodded and was about to let the projection of the World King Flower leave when a 7-colored light suddenly bloomed in the divine sea. In an instant, the 7-colored light covered the entire divine sea. The rainbow-colored light seemed to have an extremely miraculous cleansing power. Wherever it passed, the originally turbulent divine sense C instantly calmed down. The pressure on Lu Yi was greatly reduced, and he quickly turned his gaze to the seven-colored lotus in his divine C. At this moment, the seven-colored lotus was surrounded by brilliance. Everything just now was obviously its credit. The seven-colored light was still constantly scouring the divine C. Not only did the divine C calm down, but even the trembling projection of the World King flower became stable under this wonderful baptism. It was as if the irritable little beast had been comforted mentally. Not only did it not have any abnormalities, it even took the initiative to move closer to the seven-colored lotus. After a while, everything calmed down. Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes with a strange expression. Recently, many strange things had appeared in his divine sense C. First, it was the rainbow god lotus, and now there was the projection of a World King flower. If one looked closely, the projection of the World King flower was rooted in the stamen of the rainbow god lotus, adding a touch of pure white to the rainbow god lotus. This is. Hua Qianying looked at Lu Yi in astonishment. Mu He and Black Umbrella were equally puzzled. Just now, Lu Ye's performance clearly showed that he was on the verge of defeat, so why did he suddenly become so relaxed? Did you succeed? Hua Qianying asked uncertainly. Lu Yi said, that projection is now in my divine ocean. Is this considered a success? Hua Qianying was stunned and said in a daze, of course, it's. Then she became nervous again. Do you feel uncomfortable? She never expected that Lu Yi, a late-stage constellation cultivator, would be able to collect the projection of the World King flower. One had to know that Mu He and Black Umbrella had been unable to do so. Moreover, according to her calculations, if an outsider wanted to accomplish this, he or she would need to be at least a late-stage constellation cultivator. Only with such a cultivation and a powerful divine ocean could support the World King flower. She couldn't say that Lu Ye's spiritual energy was comparable to a late-stage constellation cultivator's. So, it would be too exaggerated. Although Lu Ye's spiritual energy was much stronger than cultivators in the same realm, there was still a big gap between him and a late-stage constellation cultivator. This success was entirely due to the seven-colored lotus. It replaced Lu Ye's divine ocean and became the foundation to support the World King flower. Otherwise, Lu Yi wouldn't have succeeded with his divine ocean alone. Everything was a coincidence. If he hadn't gone to the soul race's ancestral land and obtained the seven-colored lotus, he wouldn't have succeeded. At this moment, the projection of the World King flower was rooted in the seven-colored lotus. Besides looking a little strange, there didn't seem to be any discomfort. Did he really succeed? Hua Qianying couldn't believe it. She thought that the flower race would be destroyed this time, but who would have thought that Lu Ye's sudden arrival would turn things around? She was too nervous. If he really succeeded, then the flower race might have a chance at survival. She looked at Lu Yi as she spoke, and it was like a ray of light breaking through the darkness. It should be. Lu Yi nodded seriously. To the side, Mu He and Black Umbrella gaped. After a long while, Mu He said in relief, as expected of someone chosen by the reincarnation tree. He's really extraordinary. Since ancient times, those who were chosen by the reincarnation tree and bestowed with the reincarnation tree seal were all extremely talented. They could do things that ordinary people couldn't. Although the situation was a little difficult to understand, when they thought about how Lu Yi was chosen by the reincarnation tree, it didn't seem that hard to understand. When I was collecting it, the projection was madly devouring my soul force. Now that it has taken root, why isn't there any reaction? Lu Yi asked. Hua Qianying finally calmed down. After confirming that Lu Yi had succeeded, she took a deep breath and explained, just now it was a simulation. The whole process wasn't much different from collecting the real World King flower. The only difference is that after collecting it, because it was a simulation, you only collected a projection, so there was no reaction. But if you collect the real World King flower, your soul force will continue to be consumed. Can you withstand it? Lu Ye's expression turned serious. How is the consumption rate? If the consumption rate wasn't fast, he could certainly withstand it. The seven-colored soul-warming lotus was still working, and his spiritual energy was very strong. Hua Qianying shook her head and said, I'm not sure, but in theory the star constellation can't withstand it. Even Yu Yao can't last for long. Even if the late-stage Yu Yao of the Divine Wind Group succeeded in collecting the World King flower, she would sell it as soon as possible. It was impossible for her to keep it and wait for the best price to sell it. After a long time he might not be able to withstand it. After saying this, Hua Qianying's expression couldn't help but dim. Yes, so what if Lu Yi can collect the World King flower? It's useless if he can't hold on for long. Does the Flower Clan have spirit pills that can replenish soul force? Lu Yi asked. Hua Qianying recovered and nodded, yes. Then bring them all over, no matter the quality. Even some raw materials that can replenish soul force. Hua Qianying understood and said, you want to consume spirit pills to replenish your soul force? There's no other way. Hua Qianying thought for a while and nodded, it's worth a try. However, no matter how fast Lu Yi refined the World King flower, he shouldn't be faster than the consumption rate. But with the help of spirit pills he should be able to buy some time. In this branch of the Flower Clan, Hua Qianying's status was the highest. She was almost equivalent to the clan leader of this branch. This was because she was the first member of the Flower Clan to be born in this flower realm. Immediately, under her orders, the Flower Clan took out all the spirit pills that could replenish soul force and even some herbs that could be used to refine spirit pills. Although the Flower Clan was rich in alchemists, and each of them was very skilled in alchemy, no matter how skilled an alchemist was, they all grew up step by step. When their alchemy skills were not high, the quality of the spirit pills they refined was naturally not very good. Therefore, the quality of the spirit pills that the Flower Clan took out was uneven. But to Lu Yi this didn't matter. To him, even if it was a useless pill, as long as it had the effect of recovering soul force, it was useful. At most, it would consume more fuel for his talent tree. Before leaving the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he had replenished a large amount of fuel for his talent tree. He was afraid that he wouldn't have enough. Other than spirit pills, there were many flowers and herbs that could replenish soul force. These were all cultivated by the Flower Clan. Moreover, he still had the soul jade that the Soul Clan had given him. When he left the Soul Clan's ancestral land, Su Yuan gave him a storage ring that contained 1,000 pieces of soul jade. The effect of the soul jade was stronger than 1,000 top-grade spirit refining pills. Lu Yi didn't believe that with so many good things supporting him, he wouldn't be able to hold on. The problem of soul force consumption should be solved. Lu Yi asked with some expectation, when can I collect the World King flower? This thing must be brought back to 9 regions to be settled. A large domain that could grow rapidly, and a World King flower that was attached to the domain could complement the domain. They were a match made in heaven and no one could separate them. Hua Qianying smiled bitterly. As I said before, when the realm is destroyed, the World King flower will be separated from the attached realm. Only then can you collect the World King flower's main body. Lu Yi nodded. Thinking about the scene just now, it wasn't a big problem. Now that he was inside the World King flower, when the realm was destroyed, people outside wouldn't be able to break into the World King flower for a short time. At that time, it wouldn't take much effort for him to collect the World King flower. Then there's only one problem left. Lu Yi looked up at the sky. The Divine Wind pirate gang outside. When the realm was destroyed, the World King flower would be revealed. Even if Lu Yi could successfully collect it, he would have to face a difficult problem, and that was how to escape from the Divine Wind pirate gang. Mu He and Black Umbrella looked at each other and said together, let's go stop him. Among the 3 clans besides the 2 Yu Yao, the strongest was only a star constellation realm. Against the Divine Wind pirate gang, they were the only ones who could do something. If they could let Lu Yi escape with the World King flower, even if they died on the spot, it would be worth it. Lu Yi shook his head. No. Not to mention that the Divine Wind pirate gang had a late-stage Yu Yao and several Tiger Shark battleships. If the star constellation realm experts went, Mu He and Black Umbrella would also go. End of chapter. Chapter 1672. In fact, if it was just escaping from the Divine Wind pirate gang, Lu Yi still had some confidence. Back then, when he was at the early stage of the constellation realm, he was chased by Tang Jun, who was at the middle stage of the Moon Jade realm. He had used the Void Spirit Tattoo to deal with him for a long time. Of course, this had to do with Tang Jun's weak foundation, but when it came to escaping, he had a great advantage. In the past, he could only rely on the Talent Tree clone and the Void Spirit Tattoo. Now that he had 3 more drops of precious blood, his chances of escaping were even greater. Moreover, his cultivation was much stronger than before. It would not be so easy for the other party to catch him. The key was the formation. Before the Divine Wind pirate gang attacked, they had set up a formation to cover a large area of the starry sky. After all, what they did could not be exposed. Moreover, the destruction of a realm was not small. This was the outer edge of the Cave Void Galaxy, so they naturally had to cover it up first. The person who set up the formation was much more skilled than Lu Yi. Otherwise he would not have noticed it when he got close. The formation not only had the effect of concealing, but it also had a very strong binding power. If he did not break the formation he would not be able to leave. With the strength of him and the three races in the flower realm, it was impossible to break the formation. He could only use the red talisman. Su Yuqing had given him 2 red talismans back then. He had used one to deal with the old woman Qin Yuan Dai in the Green Dawn Dao world, and the other had been nourished in his body. When he killed Qin Yuan Dai he was only at the early stage of the constellation realm. Moreover, the red talisman had not been nourished in his body for long, but Qin Yuan Dai was still unable to resist and died in one blow. Now that he was at the late stage of the constellation realm, and the red talisman had been nourished in his body for all these years, its power was naturally far stronger than before. With his current cultivation, the red talisman did not have much hope of dealing with Ri. However, against a late-stage moon jade if he was lucky he might be able to kill her directly. Moreover, after Lu Yi cultivated his physique to the extreme and gave birth to precious blood, he discovered something that surprised him. If he used precious blood to nourish the red talisman, the effect was much better than ordinary nourishment. This was something that should be done. The humanoid race's talismans were originally nourished with the essence of qi and blood of cultivators. Although Lu Ye's essence of qi and blood was not bad, it was still at the level of a constellation. However, the essence of qi and blood contained in her precious blood already showed signs of surpassing the constellation level. Using it to nourish the red talismans naturally had outstanding results. It was a pity that the time was too short. If Lu Yi was allowed to nurture it for another 10 or 20 years, this red talisman would definitely pose a threat to Rizhao. Although the red talisman was precious, if he could use it to exchange for a World King flower and a chance to survive, then this was an absolutely profitable transaction. Therefore Lu Yi did not feel any heartache. An external force like the talisman was meant to be used at such a critical moment. Everything was well thought out. As for what the situation would be like when the time came, he could only do his best and leave it to fate. Seeing that Mu He and Black Umbrella still wanted to ask for orders, Lu Yi smiled and said, "Don't worry, I have my own arrangements. If everything goes well we can probably escape this calamity." Black Umbrella and Mu He did not say anything more, but they were secretly prepared to fight to the death. It was not that they did not trust Lu Yi, but the difference in strength between them and the enemy was too great. Inside the flower realm they could see the situation outside. As the patriarch of the flower race, Hua Qianying had many conveniences inside the flower realm. Otherwise they would not have discovered Lu Ye's figure and taken the initiative to bring him here. At this moment, the void in front of everyone was like a mirror that reflected the situation outside. The offensive of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang had obviously become much stronger. It was likely that Lu Ye's sudden arrival had touched their nerves. Under the command of the white-haired old man, the attacks of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang became even fiercer, and the several Tiger Shark battleships also continued to attack. Even Yu Yao from the Flame Race took action. Only the white-haired old man stood on the starship with his hands behind his back, looking down at the realm below with a gloomy expression. He did not know why Lu Yi was brought into the flower realm, but no matter how he looked at it, this was not a good sign. However, he did not put a late-stage constellation realm cultivator in his eyes. As long as he could destroy this realm, the World King flower would be his. When Lu Yi came in, the flower realm was still peaceful, but as time passed the entire flower realm began to shake. This was a sign that the destruction of the realm outside was becoming more and more serious. The creatures of the 3 races, whether it was the flower race, the wood spirit race, or the spore race, all looked nervous because the moment that would determine their life and death was about to arrive. Mu He and Black Umbrella looked at each other and saw the determination in each other's eyes. Although Lu Yi had said that he had his own plans, the difference in strength was obvious. They still decided to rush out the moment the realm was destroyed and the World King flower appeared. They did not want to kill the enemy, but only wanted to create a chance for Lu Yi to escape. If Lu Yi could successfully escape, they could smile in the underworld. Suddenly, the flower realm shook violently like never before. The creatures of the 3 races all staggered and cried out in alarm. The realm is about to shatter. Hua Qianying was so nervous that her face turned pale. Mu He and Black Umbrella took a step forward. Just as they were about to charge out of the flower realm, they suddenly froze and looked in Lu Ye's direction in shock. This was because at this moment, Lu Ye's body suddenly emitted an extremely terrifying aura. When they looked over, they saw that Lu Ye's entire body was wrapped in a dazzling red light. This is. Muhi's pupils shrank. Red talisman. Black Umbrella recognized the essence of the red light. A late-stage constellation realm cultivator could not activate such power. The only possibility was the power of a red talisman. And from the terrifying power fluctuations, this was not an ordinary red talisman. It was definitely a red talisman from the dwarf race. Normally, a red talisman activated by a late-stage constellation realm cultivator would not cause such a huge commotion. Although the two of them were not very knowledgeable, they had heard of the dwarf race's red talisman. So that's how it is. Muhi and Black Umbrella suddenly understood. They did not know where Lu Ye's confidence came from. It turned out that he had a red talisman with him. If that was the case, there was hope for them to escape this place. The aura on Lu Ye's body became more and more violent. Under the red light, even his eyes and black hair turned blood red, causing people to be intimidated. The spirit power around him surged and frantically poured into the red talisman in his body. Lu Ye only felt that the red talisman's aura in his body was becoming more and more dangerous and terrifying. It felt like it could explode at any time. He tried his best to pour spirit power into the red talisman while suppressing the explosion of the red talisman. This was because he had a premonition that this explosion would only happen once. This red talisman's effect was not the same as the one he activated last time. Even if they were both made by Su Yuqing, her refining of red talismans depended on luck, so it was impossible for every red talisman to have the same effect. Kacha. The sound of something shattering rang out. The turbulence in the flower realm reached its peak in an instant, and all the creatures could not help but feel as if the world had turned upside down. The realm had shattered. It was at this moment that Lu Yi felt that the projection of the World King flower in his spirit sea that was rooted in the stamen of the Rainbow Divine Lotus had formed a mysterious connection with something. After withdrawing this projection, Lu Yi had not noticed anything unusual, but at this moment, there was finally a reaction. Withdrawing the projection was both a simulation and a positioning system. When the World King flower appeared, with the help of this positioning system and Hua Qianying, Lu Yi could easily collect it. Fellow Taoist, be careful. Hua Qianying's voice rang out. Relying on her identity as the leader of the flower race and the first creature born in the flower realm, she did her best to help Lu Yi collect the World King flower. As her voice rang out, the entire world began to blur, as if the world was collapsing and rushing towards Lu Ye's spirit sea. At this moment, inside the concealment array, on the star ship that looked like a ship, a white-haired old man stepped out with an excited expression and rushed towards the realm that had just been shattered. Following the destruction of the domain, a huge white flower suddenly appeared in his field of vision. The World King flower. Sure enough, the information he had received was correct. There really was a World King flower hidden in this realm. This was a treasure that all the large realms in the universe coveted. As long as he could obtain it this time, he would be able to completely rid himself of his identity as a galactic pirate. The benefits he would obtain would be unimaginable in this lifetime or even the next. He was so excited that even his withered hands were trembling. As he rushed forward, he roared, "Get out of my way!" He was going to collect the World King flower himself. The galactic pirates naturally did not dare to disobey him. Hearing this, they all retreated and looked at the huge flower that had suddenly appeared with scorching eyes. However, they also knew that in the entire galactic pirate gang, only the white-haired old man had the ability to collect the World King flower. Even Yu Yao from the Flame Race could not do it. When the white-haired old man arrived near the World King flower, his eyes became misty as he looked at the World King flower as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Just as he was about to circulate his soul power to collect it, the old man suddenly frowned. This was because he discovered that a speck of red light had suddenly appeared in the pure white World King flower. Before he could react to what was going on, the red light suddenly expanded and instantly dyed the entire World King flower blood red. In the next instant, the huge World King flower suddenly disappeared, and a figure shrouded in red light suddenly appeared in his field of vision. This sudden change not only stunned the galactic pirate gang cultivators who were paying attention, but even the old man who was close by was extremely stunned. He was completely unable to react to what had happened. However, as a great fear descended, even though he did not know what had happened, he knew that something bad was going to happen. Enveloped in red light, Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes turned into two blood-red moons as he unsheathed his mountain pan saber. With the terrifying power of the red talisman, he felt that no matter what was in front of him, he could destroy it with a single slash. According to his original plan, What he needed to do now was to quickly lock onto the white-haired old man's position and kill him with a single slash. As long as he killed this white-haired old man, who was the strongest among them, the rest would not be a problem. He was originally worried that he would not be able to find the old man, or that the old man was too far away from him. Who would have thought that after collecting the World King flower and revealing himself, he would see the old man standing not too far away from him? This was really a coincidence. End of chapter. Chapter 1673. As the Pan Mountain Saber slashed down, the red light surrounding Lu Yi flowed into the Pan Mountain Saber. Then a huge red saber light shot out like a crescent moon. With a cracking sound, Lu Yi felt a sharp pain in his right arm. His flesh cracked and blood splattered everywhere. Even the Pan Mountain Saber hummed slightly. It had to be known that this was the saber of the soldier tribe. Although it was only at the level of a spirit treasure, it was limited by Lu Ye's own cultivation. Its quality was not as simple as a spirit treasure. Normally, no matter how Lu Yi urged his own strength, the Pan Mountain Saber would not have any abnormal reaction. But this time, the Pan Mountain Saber trembled because of the surging power. Fortunately, this was the Pan Mountain Saber. If it were the Pan Mountain Saber of the past, Lu Yi suspected that it would have directly shattered. The power of this saber had already surpassed the limits of a spirit treasure. Not far away, the white-haired old man's pupils shrank to the size of a needle. Although he felt something was wrong the moment Lu Yi urged his saber, Lu Ye's movements were simply too fast. How could he have reacted in time? He was still immersed in the excitement and joy of being able to obtain the World King flower when the threat of death descended upon him. Seeing the red saber light erupt, the white-haired old man's first thought was to flee. But he was shocked to discover that the saber light had completely locked his aura. Unless he had the ability to instantly teleport 100,000 kilometers away, there was no way he could avoid this terrifying attack. He hurriedly took out an item. It looked like a beast bone. As he crazily poured his magic power into it, the beast bone shattered and rolled back towards the white-haired old man. In the blink of an eye, the white-haired old man's body was covered in a layer of gray light. Within the light, the image of a strange beast could be seen swimming. But this was not the end. At the same time, he took out a small bell-like magic treasure and covered his body with it. With these two magic treasures protecting him, the white-haired old man did not feel the slightest sense of security. At this time he could not do anything else. The crescent-shaped red blade aura arrived in front of him. Like cutting through tofu, it cut through the protection of the small bell magic treasure. Then, it pierced through the gray light curtain and penetrated the old man's body without any hindrance. Not far behind the old man, there were two tiger shark battleships watching the show. They had been ordered to retreat by the white-haired old man just now. They had not expected such an unforeseen event to happen. The people piloting these two tiger shark battleships were only Constellation cultivators. Their reactions were not as fast as the white-haired old man's. When the red crescent blade light attacked, they did not even know what was happening before they were swept away. First, it broke through the two layers of defense of the white-haired old man, then killed him on the spot. Then it broke through the two tiger shark warships. The crescent blade seemed to have weakened a little, but its speed and ferocity were still terrifying. With a boom, the entire region of space shook. The crescent blade slashed at the formation that enveloped this region of space, creating a huge gap in the formation. The cultivators of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang were dumbfounded and frightened. The sudden outbreak of terror shocked them so much that they almost thought that Rizhao had arrived. Lu Yi hurriedly rushed towards the gap. Although he had killed the strongest late-stage Yu Yao, the other side still had two tiger shark battleships and an early-stage Yu Yao, as well as many enemies. It was not wise to stay here for long. Now that the formation had been broken, it was naturally more important to escape. Before the cultivators of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang could react, Lu Yi had already rushed to the gap in the formation. Just as he was rejoicing that everything had gone according to plan, he suddenly frowned and turned around. Where the white-haired old man had died, his figure was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there was a tattered palm-sized puppet. There was a massive wound on the puppet's body that ran from the inside out. Looking at the location and proportion of the wound, it was exactly the same as the wound the white-haired old man had suffered. Death Substitution Puppet. Lu Yi recognized this item at a glance. This was because he had seen it in the Constellation Hall before. This item was a unique life-saving treasure. It could be used to transfer all of the damage to the scapegoat puppet, thereby saving the user's life. In the universe, death substitution puppets had always been a priceless treasure. They were incredibly rare. Lu Yi had never imagined that Yu Yao from a pirate gang would actually have a death substitution puppet. He immediately had a bad feeling. Sure enough, a powerful aura suddenly awakened from the nearby ship. Immediately afterward, the white-haired old man, who should have been dead, suddenly appeared. He stared at Lu Yi with a dark expression, gritted his teeth and growled, "Brat, I want you dead." A death substitution puppet. What kind of precious treasure was this? And he had actually wasted it on a late-stage Constellation Hall cultivator. Even though Lu Ye's slash was incredibly powerful and had the ability to instantly kill him, the old man's eyesight was extraordinary. He could naturally tell that it was the might of a red talisman. Otherwise, how could a late-stage Constellation Hall cultivator possibly unleash such a terrifying slash? A death substitution puppet was precious, but so was a red talisman. It was already impressive for a late-stage Constellation Hall cultivator to have one, so how could there be a second one? Even so, the old man still didn't dare to approach Lu Yi. He simply urged his divine sense from afar. In an instant, a tyrannical and powerful divine sense swept towards Lu Yi like a tidal wave. It almost condensed into a form visible to the naked eye, transforming into a spear that shot towards Lu Yi. With his foundation as a late-stage Yu Yao, even a divine sense attack was enough to take down a late-stage Constellation Hall cultivator. That was what he thought, however, the result surprised him greatly. After the spear condensed from divine sense struck Lu Ye's body, it actually didn't have the desired effect. Lu Ye's body only swayed slightly and he was fine. Then he charged out of the gap in the formation without looking back. What was going on? The white-haired old man was stunned. Then he roared, "After him!" Only now did the remaining cultivators of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang come to their senses. They hurriedly used various methods and rushed out of the formation in pursuit. The white-haired old man even took the lead. He had lost a precious death substitution puppet, 2 defensive magic weapons, and 2 tiger shark warships. Even the formation he had painstakingly set up had been broken. If he couldn't snatch the World King Flower back, it would be a great loss. Therefore he wouldn't let Lu Yi go no matter what. Although he didn't understand how a late-stage Constellation Hall cultivator could collect the World King Flower, he saw the scene when Lu Yi appeared. He clearly saw that the World King Flower was indeed collected by Lu Yi. As long as he caught up to that boy and took him down, the World King Flower would still be his. At this moment he was extremely vexed. If he had known this would happen, he would have just killed this boy when he found him. There wouldn't have been so many twists and turns later. However, at that time he wanted Lu Yi to be a laborer. Coupled with the fact that Lu Ye's cultivation was too far below his, he didn't pay too much attention to it. Lu Yi had already activated the blood escape technique. His figure turned into a streak of bloody light as he rushed forward. Moreover, the moment he rushed out of the gap in the formation, 3 blood doppelgangers condensed. They split up with his main body and fled in different directions. Although he didn't expect the white-haired old man to have a treasure like the death substitution puppet, when he was waiting in the flower realm, he had already made various deductions. Therefore he was able to deal with any kind of situation. What he was most worried about was that there were more than 2 Yu Yao in the Divine Wind Pirate Gang. What if there were more that he hadn't discovered before? The current situation was a little bad, but it wasn't that bad. The Divine Wind Pirate Gang only had 2 Yu Yao. One was a late-stage Constellation Hall cultivator, and the other was an early-stage Constellation Hall cultivator. However, he hadn't expected the white-haired old man to come back to life with the help of the death substitution puppet. Therefore he still had to endure the pursuit of a late-stage Yu Yao. Whether he could escape or not would depend on his own ability. It had to be said that the divine sense of a late-stage Yu Yao was indeed tyrannical. After all, she was only one step away from the Sunshine Realm. Although Lu Yi had killed a late-stage Yu Yao in the past, the other party was a member of the Blood Clan and was naturally countered by him. At that time he had also been possessed by Li Shang, so he couldn't be too accurate. The white-haired old man was obviously an old expert who had been immersed in this realm for countless years. Even if it was just a simple divine sense attack, it wasn't something that a star constellation could contend against. It was all thanks to the Rainbow Divine Lotus that Lu Yi was safe and sound. When the white-haired old man activated the divine sense attack, Lu Yi had already activated the Divine Guard, condensing layers of protection in his divine sense C. Unfortunately, the difference in their cultivation was too great. The layers of Divine Guard didn't have much effect before they shattered. Immediately after, the spear-like attack blasted into his divine sense C, stirring up monstrous waves. Under normal circumstances, if a star constellation encountered such an attack, their divine sense would either be shattered or their divine sense would be injured. Let alone escape, it was hard to say whether they could survive. However, at this critical moment, the rainbow divine lotus actually emitted a rainbow-colored light. Wherever the light passed, the turbulent divine sense sea quickly calmed down. Lu Yi really didn't expect that the rainbow divine lotus would also have a suppressive effect in addition to nourishing the divine sense. If this was the case, he wouldn't have to be afraid of similar divine sense attacks in the future. Although the specter ship in the divine sense sea was strange and powerful, it could only be used when other people's divine sense avatars invaded their divine sense sea. Its effect was different from that of the rainbow divine lotus. After leaving the array, Lu Ye's original body immediately fled in a direction. This was the plan that he had deduced before. In fact, at this time, there were only two directions he could escape in. One was the K-Void Galaxy. No galaxy would welcome a star pirate gang. The K-Void Galaxy was guarded by a sunshine powerhouse. If the divine wind dared to chase there, as long as it alarmed sunshine there, it would definitely be impossible to leave alive. However, escaping to the K-Void Galaxy had a drawback. If news of the World King Flower was leaked, Lu Yi couldn't guarantee that Sunshine of the K-Void Galaxy wouldn't be interested. One had to know that the K-Void Galaxy wasn't a top realm. How could it not covet a treasure like the World King Flower? Once the white-haired old man was targeted by Sunshine, there was a high chance that he would throw out the temptation of the World King Flower in order to survive. If he escaped from the tiger's mouth and entered the wolf's den, the situation would be bad. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't even consider escaping to the K-Void Galaxy. Since he couldn't escape to the K-Void Galaxy, there was only one direction left. The Yinyang Great Millstone. End of chapter. Chapter 1674. The Yinyang Great Grinding Stone was Lu Ye's goal in the first place. There were bound to be many dangers within such a space wonder. Moreover, he also had some advantages within the space wonder. If he could use this space wonder to shake off the Divine Wind Pirate Gang, that would be for the best. But if he couldn't, then he could only look for an opportunity to upgrade Yu Yao. Once he upgraded Yu Yao, there would be nothing to worry about. At that time, even if he still wasn't a match for the white-haired old man, escaping wouldn't be a problem. Thus, he only had one goal from beginning to end. On the other side, the Divine Wind Pirate Gang had already rushed out of the Great Array under the leadership of the white-haired old man. But when they looked up, they were dumbfounded. Because in their field of vision, there were 4 blood-red lights, each of them flying in 4 different directions at an incredible speed. The white-haired old man recognized the blood escape technique with a single glance. After all, this secret technique was far too famous in the starry skies. But these 4 figures, that constellation brat actually knew a doppelganger technique. The white-haired old man coldly snorted and immediately urged his secret technique, a light flashing through his eyes. He cultivated an eye technique. Others might be able to pass off a doppelganger technique as the real thing, but it couldn't escape his eyes. Urging his eye technique, the old man immediately observed the 4 fleeing figures. In the next moment, a look of shock appeared on his face. How is this possible? Under his eye technique, the 4 figures didn't seem too different from each other. They all seemed to be the main body. But this was impossible. Of the 4 figures, there had to be 3 doppelgangers and 1 main body. Since he couldn't see any flaws, it could only mean that the other party's doppelganger technique was far more profound than his eye technique could see. Split up and chase. In the next moment, the old man made a decision. No matter which one was the main body, they must have consumed a great deal of energy at this moment. How could a constellation brat activate such a terrifying red talisman without a price? The other party wouldn't be able to last much longer. Moreover, he had also received the World King Flower. That thing was an enormous burden to a late-stage constellation brat. Many cultivators of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang received the order and immediately split up, chasing in 4 different directions. The white-haired old man was by himself, and so was Yu Yao from the Flame Tribe. The remaining Divine Wind cultivators were split into 2 groups, each with a Tiger Shark battleship. At this moment, Lu Yi was indeed feeling some pressure. Activating the red talisman had consumed a lot of his energy. If it was any other constellation, they would probably lose their ability to fight after such an attack. However, his foundation was far superior to the average constellation. Moreover, he had already swallowed many recovery spirit pills, so the situation was still within his expectations. However, the pressure from activating the red talisman was only secondary. Once he recovered, he would be fine. But the pressure from collecting the World King Flower's main body would continue to exist. This was because the World King Flower was actually devouring his soul force. Fortunately, he had the Rainbow Divine Lotus in his Divine Sea, and under its nourishment he was able to greatly reduce the amount of soul power he consumed, but he still couldn't make ends meet. This was within his expectations. As Lu Yi fled, he took out the spirit pill given to him by the Flower Tribe. He did not care what grade it was and directly swallowed it. Only then was he barely able to maintain the balance of his soul power consumption. After a little calculation, with the many spirit pills and spirit flowers and herbs given to him by the Flower Tribe, it wouldn't be a problem for him to last for a month. As time passed, his soul power would continue to be consumed. Once it reached a certain extent, he would not be able to withstand it. However, he still had 1,000 soul jades. They were given to him by Elder Su Yuan before he left the soul race's ancestral land. These things were much better than the spirit pills given to him by the Flower Tribe to replenish his soul force. With these 1,000 soul jades, Lu Yi felt that it would not be a problem for him to last for another month or two. Thus, the white-haired old man was counting on the World King Flower to overwhelm him, but he definitely wouldn't be able to do so in a short period of time. Thanks to the talent tree, if it were any other cultivator, even if they had so many resources to replenish their soul force, it would be useless if they couldn't quickly refine and absorb them. However, Lu Yi could use the talent tree to quickly replenish his soul power consumption. Soon, his main body sensed the aura of the pursuer behind him. It had to be said that his luck was really bad. It was the white-haired old man. If the white-haired old man had been chasing after his doppelgangers, it would have bought him more time to escape. However, the white-haired old man had actually chased after his main body. Lu Yi couldn't figure out whether the white-haired old man was really lucky or whether he had seen through his main body's doppelgangers. He should be lucky. If he could really see through his main body, he wouldn't have ordered his subordinates to split up. The difference in their strength was too great. Even though Lu Yi had activated the blood escape technique, the distance between them continued to shrink. At this time, it was obviously not a wise decision to take out the star boat. After all, the star boat needed time to increase its speed. Even if it was only for a short period of time, the white-haired old man might catch up to him. He could only continue to flee and try his best to stall for time. At the same time, he sensed the situation of his 3 doppelgangers. Although his doppelgangers were in a better situation than his main body, they were not in a good situation either. One of his doppelgangers was being chased by Yu Yao of the Flame Tribe, while the other 2 doppelgangers were being chased by the Tiger Shark battleships. He had to think of a way to deal with these small fries. Otherwise, his doppelgangers would not be able to escape their line of sight. Even if his main body moved over, his location would still be exposed. However, with his current strength, it would be difficult for him to deal with Yu Yao. The Tiger Shark battleships were almost equivalent to Yu Yao. They were equally difficult to deal with. After thinking for a moment, Lu Yi immersed his consciousness and connected to the World King Flower in his Divine Sea. In the Flower World, after Lu Yi collected the World King Flower, the turbulent flower world returned to peace. The members of the flower race, wood spirit race and spore race waited nervously. They had no idea what was going on in the outside world, so they naturally had no idea what would happen to Lu Yi after she collected the World King Flower. Normally, with a late-stage Yu Yao outside, Lu Yi would not have a good ending. However, after Lu Yi had displayed the might of the red talisman, they felt a little more hopeful. Just as they were waiting anxiously, a voice suddenly rang out in the flower realm. Patriarch Mu He, Patriarch Black Umbrella. It was Lu Ye's voice. Mu He and Black Umbrella looked delighted and hurriedly replied, "Here." Hua Qianying also hurriedly asked, "Fellow Taoist, what's the situation now?" Lu Yi said, "I've already escaped from the formation. However, I'm being chased now. Therefore, I need the 2 of you to help me." Hua Qianying hurriedly said, "Tell us, how do you want us to help you?" Lu Yi was being chased by a pirate gang, and there was even a late-stage Yu Yao among them. Therefore, Hua Qianying and the others were extremely worried. "Fellow Taoist, please help me get Patriarch Mu He and Patriarch Black Umbrella to come out of the flower realm and help me kill the enemy." Although the World King Flower had been collected by Lu Yi, the living beings of the flower realm could still leave and appear by Lu Ye's side. Of course, the prerequisite was that Hua Qianying's help was that she controlled the opening of the flower realm's door. Hua Qianying immediately looked at Mu He and Black Umbrella. The 2 of them did not hesitate at all and nodded. No problem. Hua Qianying pursed her red lips. I also have no problem on my side. Lu Ye's voice rang out again. Then listen to my orders. After saying this, there was no more movement. Hua Qianying looked at Mu He and Black Umbrella with worry in her eyes. The situation outside was not good. Lu Yi was being chased by such a powerful enemy. At this moment he was obviously at the end of his rope, which was why he had asked for help. Mu He and Black Umbrella were only at the early stage Yu Yao. Even if they appeared and helped, there was a limit to how much they could help. Seeing her worry, Mu He smiled honestly. Don't worry. Even if we die on the spot, we will definitely create an opportunity for fellow Daoist Lu to escape. They were already prepared to die, so naturally they would not waver at this moment. Thank you for your trouble. Hua Qianying's eyes were slightly red. She knew that once Mu He and Black Umbrella left the Flower Realm, there was a high chance that they would not survive. However, things had already come to this point and there was no other way. She believed that as long as Lu Yi had any possibility of escaping, he would not ask them for help. Don't worry. I will take good care of the Wood Spirit clan. Mu He and Black Umbrella's expressions became more and more determined, and they both had the courage to face death. At this time, spiritual power surged from Lu Ye's body, and the void spirit patterns formed. The white-haired old man's figure was 5,000 miles behind him. This distance already made Lu Yi feel threatened, and he knew that he had to leave. Otherwise, if he got any closer, the old man would attack. When Lu Ye's spiritual power surged, the white-haired old man naturally sensed it and hurriedly used his eye technique to observe carefully. Although he was sure that Lu Yi, a late-stage nebula, could not escape from his grasp, he was still very careful because of the power of the red talisman. Then he saw an unbelievable scene. A complex spirit pattern appeared under Lu Ye's feet, and then his entire person disappeared into thin air. The white-haired old man's eyes widened, and he almost thought that he was dreaming. A moment later he rushed to the place where Lu Yi had disappeared. With a grave expression, he sensed his surroundings and exclaimed, "Space diversion technique?" He could clearly sense traces of space force from the remnant power here. His face was full of disbelief because this was not something that a constellation could perform. Did the other party use a rare treasure? This kid. Who the hell was he? How could he be so rich? The red talisman was obviously made by the dwarf clan, and its value was immeasurable. This rare treasure that could divert space must be extraordinary as well. Could it be that he was a rising star from some great power? The white-haired old man thought to himself and suddenly felt a little uneasy. If that was the case, then he had to kill him to silence him. Otherwise there would be endless trouble. His powerful divine sense suddenly spread out, and his eye technique was pushed to the extreme, spying on Lu Ye's movements from the residual traces of space power. The next moment he looked in one direction and quickly rushed there. In that direction, the Blood Treasure clone was dodging the attack from the Tiger Shark warship. Although the Blood Treasure clone could exert all of Lu Ye's power, he did not have a suitable weapon in his hands. Therefore, in the face of such an attack that was comparable to Yu Yao's, he had no idea of fighting back. Moreover, every time the Blood Treasure clone attacked, it would consume the power of the Blood Treasure, reducing the time it could maintain. Therefore, the Blood Treasure clone could only dodge. The Tiger Shark warship chased after him. Seeing that the Blood Treasure clone was unable to fight back, they slowly relaxed. They had seen the terrifying power of the red talisman with their own eyes. How could they not be afraid? Now that they had determined that this was just a clone, there was nothing to be afraid of. But at this moment, a figure flashed out beside the Blood Treasure clone. Lu Yi appeared out of thin air, and at the same time, an illusory door appeared. End of chapter. Chapter 1675. Lu Yi was well aware of the capabilities of the Tiger Shark battleship. When he returned to the 9 provinces, he had bought 10 of them. This type of battleship was the smallest type that could be piloted by 3 to 5 people. At this moment, the Divine Wind Pirate Gang's Tiger Shark battleship was piloted by 4 constellations. 2 of them were in the late stage and the other 2 were in the middle stage. With their foundation and the various configurations on the battleship, they could indeed launch attacks comparable to Yu Yao's. Of course, the frequency of their attacks was slightly lower. Even so, the precious blood doppelganger was in an extremely difficult situation. If it weren't for the doppelganger only fleeing and not tangling with them at all, it would have been killed long ago. At this moment, under the dumbfounded gazes of the 4 cultivators on the Tiger Shark battleship, another Lu Yi appeared out of thin air, startling them. What was going on? However, one of them reacted quickly. After being stunned for a moment, he revealed an overjoyed expression. This must be the real body. Quickly take him down. As soon as he finished speaking, another strange door appeared in their field of vision. Immediately after, from the door, a white cloud-like thing suddenly floated out and spread out in all directions. Spore cloud. This was obviously a method used by the Black Umbrella. This thing looked like a white cloud, but in fact, it was made up of billions of spores that could not be seen with the naked eye. The sudden change made the 4 cultivators on the Tiger Shark battleship feel that something was wrong. What shocked them even more was that from the strange white cloud, there were actually 2 Yu Yao's auras. Where did 2 Yu Yao come from? The 4 cultivators of different races racked their brains but could not figure out what was going on. Before they could react, the huge spore cloud had already enveloped the battleship. Its power was ferocious and a roar of anger came from within. It was Muhi's roar. His roar was mixed with boundless anger and violence. It was not easy for the wood spirits and the spore race. They had been living well in the Blue Jade realm, but in the end the blood race had invaded their home and forced them to abandon it. The people under the constellations were settled in the tree realm of the reincarnation tree. The wood spirits and the spore race could only leave their homes and embark on a journey to find a new home. During this period of time, they had encountered many hardships and tribulations, causing their already small population to dwindle even more. Fortunately, the heavens had taken pity on them, and they had coincidentally met a member of the flower tribe. With the guidance of that flower tribe, they had been able to settle down in the flower realm. Furthermore, because of the flower tribe's vigorous nurturing, the 2 tribe leaders had been promoted to Yu Yao. Originally, they thought that the future that belonged to the 2 races was about to arrive. Who would have thought that the flower domain would be targeted by a group of space pirates? If the flower realm was taken over by the space pirates, not only would the flower race suffer, the few remaining members of their race would also suffer. The 2 clan leaders were sad, angry, and powerless, until the appearance of Lu Yi, who brought a slight change to the miserable future. Mu He and Black Umbrella had already decided to risk their lives to protect Lu Yi and escape. Therefore, the moment they passed through the door, the 2 clansmen unleashed their full strength. The spore cloud spread out and enveloped the warship. The cultivators of the 4 pirate gangs in the warship were shocked. To their horror, they found that the speed of the warship had plummeted, as if it had fallen into a swamp. Even if they tried their best to steer the warship, it was still as slow as a turtle crawling. Before they could think of a solution, a loud boom came from outside the warship. Then the entire warship began to shake violently. Within the spore cloud, clan leader Muhi's body had already expanded to a height of 1,000 feet. He was like an indomitable giant. Countless sharp wooden spikes suddenly appeared on his body. They were like long whips, wildly stabbing at the Tiger Shark warship. Restricted by the spore cloud, the Tiger Shark warship was unable to move. How could it possibly dodge such a fierce and furious attack? The 4 cultivators in the warship panicked and could only desperately activate the warship's defensive formation. But how strong could the defensive formation of such a small warship be? It probably wouldn't be a problem to block 2 or 3 attacks from Yu Yao. The key was that the furious Muhi's attacks were densely packed and layered. In the blink of an eye, the Tiger Shark warship's defensive formation was broken. Sharp wooden spikes pierced the warship from all directions. The violent tremors almost made the 4 figures in the warship unable to stand still. Outside the spore cloud, Lu Ye's main body was watching. He originally planned to make a move, but when he saw the ferocious situation inside the spore cloud, he knew that there was no need for him to do anything. The precious blood clone was already far away. When his main body descended, the clone continued to flee forward. The only rule of using the clone to escape was, the main body and the clone should try not to stay together as much as possible. Lu Yi knew this very well. In just 10 breaths, the warship's defensive formation trapped in the spore cloud was completely broken. Not only that, but the surface of the warship was also full of holes, one after another. If it weren't for the fact that the warship was made of extraordinary materials, it would have been pierced through. However, as Muhi's attacks continued, a wooden spike finally pierced into the warship. The 4 cultivators of the Star Pirate Gang looked at the hard wooden spike, their faces pale. If such an attack pierced their bodies, they didn't have the confidence to block it. In the end, the difference in strength between Yu Yao and Xingxiu was a fundamental difference in strength. When the wooden spike was pulled out, the white spore cloud poured in through the hole. The 4 cultivators turned pale with fright, but they couldn't resist at all. They could only watch as the spore cloud filled the interior of the warship. Black Umbrella's voice rang in Lu Ye's ears. "Young friend, I have them under control. Do you want to kill them directly?" "You have them under control?" Lu Ye was stunned. Because the battlefield was surrounded by the huge spore cloud, he could only vaguely sense the situation inside. It was difficult for him to pry into the specifics. "How do you control them?" Lu Ye asked. Black Umbrella said, "They have been corroded by my spores. Now they are my puppets. Perhaps I can ask them for information?" If not for this consideration, Black Umbrella would have killed them long ago. However, why was the situation different from what he and Muhi had expected? The two of them thought that after leaving the Flower Realm, they would have to face the terrifying might of that late-stage Yu Yao. The other party had an entire star pirate gang as her helpers. Even if the two of them had advanced to Yu Yao, they definitely wouldn't be a match for her. This was a battle that they couldn't retreat from even if they knew that they would die. They were already prepared to fight to the death. However, in reality there was no late-stage Yu Yao here. When they came out, there was only a tiger shark warship. With his and Muhi's cooperation, they easily took it down. The cultivators on the warship didn't have high cultivation bases. They were only star mansions and there were only 4 of them. What about the others in the star pirate gang? What about the other 2 Yu Yao? Black Umbrella was a little confused. There's such a thing? Lu Yi was astonished. He knew that the spore tribe could control their spore clouds and cooperate with the wood spirits in battle. However, he didn't know that the spore tribe had such a strange ability. Just as he was about to say that there was no need to ask for any information and that they could just kill them, he thought for a moment and hurriedly asked, "How much control can you exert?" Black Umbrella replied, "They are now equivalent to my clones. I can have basic control over their bodies. Of course, if you give me some time and allow me to erode their spirit sea, then I can have complete control over them." This ability was truly strange. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "Don't kill them. They are still useful." Soon, the spore clouds dispersed, revealing the situation on the battlefield. Muhi scratched his head and looked around blankly. What happened to the strong enemy? What happened to facing death with equanimity? Why was there only one tiger shark warship? To think that he was so explosive just now. In the end, he felt like he was swatting a mosquito. Lu Yi was about to go forward to check the situation on the warship when his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He turned to look in a certain direction and was extremely surprised. So fast. That white-haired old man had actually caught up. What puzzled Lu Yi was how did he lock onto his position? With the help of the void spirit pattern, he could teleport tens of thousands of miles. Logically speaking, that white-haired old man's divine sense shouldn't be able to spread here. How did he catch up so quickly? However, on second thought, perhaps the cultivators on the warship were attacked just now and sent a message to the outside world. However, no matter what, it wasn't good to stay here for long. Don't use your power. Lu Yi flashed to the side of Muhi and Black Umbrella. As he spoke, an incomparably huge void spirit pattern had already begun to form, spreading out under the 3 of them and even the tiger shark warship. When the void spirit pattern appeared, the white-haired old man was still far away. He could only watch as Lu Ye's figure disappeared again. Damn it. The white-haired old man was extremely annoyed. He really didn't put a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator in his eyes, but who would have thought that a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator would have such an unfathomable ability? However, the other party should have borrowed the power of some strange treasure. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to do this with his own ability. Since it was a strange treasure, it must be a great burden on the body to activate it, and it couldn't be used too many times. With this thought in mind, the white-haired old man quickly came to the place where Lu Yi disappeared and used his eye technique to observe. Just like before, he determined the direction of Lu Ye's escape based on the traces of spatial power left in this place. Not far behind the other doppelganger, there was also a tiger shark warship chasing after it. Soon, this tiger shark warship suffered the same fate as its companion, but this time, Lu Yi didn't just bring his main body. He also brought Muhi and Black Umbrella with him. When he appeared, Black Umbrella's spore cloud instantly spread out. The tiger shark warship chasing after him didn't even have time to react before it crashed into the spore cloud. What happened next was simple. Black Umbrella trapped Muhi, and the second tiger shark warship fell into Lu Ye's hands. All of this happened in less than 10 breaths of time. Lu Yi looked into the distance where the third doppelganger was. Compared to the previous 2 doppelganger, this doppelganger was in a particularly bad situation because the one chasing after him was Yu Yao of the Flame Clan. If it weren't for the fact that blood escape was extremely fast, he would have been caught long ago. Even so, the distance between them was rapidly closing. It wouldn't be long before the doppelganger was within Yu Yao's attack range. At that time, the doppelganger wouldn't be able to resist. Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry to rush over. Instead, he urged his divine sense to control his three doppelganger. End of chapter. Chapter 1676. At this moment, Yu Yao from the Flame Clan was surprised to discover that the clone that had been running away was now surging with energy. A strange spirit pattern seemed to be slowly spreading out. He didn't know what was going on, but he knew that he couldn't let the clone do as he pleased. However, there was still some distance between them. Even if he attacked, he wouldn't be able to pose a threat to the clone. He could only give chase with all his might. This clone was constructing the void, and so were the other two clones. Lu Yi didn't think much of the strongest white-haired old man. The difference in strength was too great. Even with the help of the wood trunk and black umbrella, there was nothing he could do. However, other than the strongest white-haired old man, Lu Yi wasn't going to let the others go. This had nothing to do with enmity. The main reason was that Lu Yi didn't want his precious blood clones to be targeted by enemies. Reducing the number of enemies as much as possible would help him escape. In the blink of an eye, the three precious blood clones had completed their void spirit patterns almost simultaneously. The clone that was being chased had slowed down a lot because it was constructing the spirit patterns. Now it was finally within Yu Yao's attack range. Seeing this, Yu Yao from the Flame Clan naturally didn't hold back. He threw a punch in the clone's direction from afar. With this punch, the flames on his body surged wildly. At the same time, a lifelike fire dragon that was hundreds of meters long roared out. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of the clone. The clone's expression was calm as usual. The void spirit patterns under his feet glowed brightly. Yu Yao from the Flame Clan looked over coldly. He was sure that his opponent would be seriously injured if not killed by his attack. After all, the difference in strength was obvious. The light engulfed the clone's position, so Yu Yao from the Flame Clan couldn't see what was going on inside. However, his expression soon froze. The development of the situation seemed to be a little different from what he had expected. When the light dissipated, Yu Yao from the Flame Clan was stunned to see three figures appear. All of them looked exactly the same. For a moment he couldn't tell which one he was chasing. What was going on? How was it that his punch had split the other party apart? In the time it took for him to be stunned, the three precious blood clones had already fled in three different directions. Yu Yao from the Flame Clan was stunned. He didn't know which one to chase. Gritting his teeth, he randomly chose a direction. At the same time, he was a little puzzled as to why his punch had not hurt the other party. After he left, Lu Ye's main body began to construct the void spirit runes. Then he moved to the side of a doppelganger, looked around, and chose a good position. He asked Mu He and Black Umbrella to ambush with two Tiger Shark warships. There were many asteroids and floating continents in space, so concealing them wasn't a problem at all. The avatar being chased by Yu Yao of the Yen clan was doing its best to escape. However, it didn't run for long before the distance between them reached a dangerous level. Lu Ye's true body didn't hesitate to call back his avatar with the help of the void spirit runes when he sensed the ferocious fluctuations of magic power behind him. Yu Yao of the Yen clan was having a mental breakdown. The enemy was clearly right in front of him and he was about to succeed. However, with the appearance of a spirit pattern, the enemy disappeared into thin air. He couldn't help but feel that he had nowhere to exert his power. But soon, a trace of spiritual energy fluctuation came from behind him. He hurriedly turned his head and saw that the figure that had just disappeared was fleeing over there. It turned out that although the other party's method was amazing, he couldn't get far. Yu Yao from the Flame Clan was relieved. He swore that he would destroy the other party to vent his anger. As they chased each other, the distance between them continued to decrease. After a while, a scene that surprised Yu Yao appeared. In the starry sky ahead of them, two Tiger Shark warships were approaching from the left and right. He could tell at a glance that they were his warships. Although he was a little puzzled as to why the two warships had become so tattered after just a short while, as if they had gone through a great battle, he didn't think too much about it. He only urged his divine sense to send a voice transmission to the two warships. Surround him. Don't let him escape. The two warships obeyed the order and surrounded the doppelganger. Along the way, the top of the warships began to glow. It was obvious that the warships were accumulating power. Yu Yao from the Flame Clan, the Doppelganger, and the Tiger Shark warships were constantly closing in on each other. The light in front of the warships was also getting brighter and brighter. At this time, the cultivators of the pirate group inside the Tiger Shark warships under the control of the Black Umbrella had all turned into energy sources. They poured their energy into the warships without any hesitation. This level of energy injection was usually only used when one's life was on the line. It could greatly increase the power of the warships. Correspondingly, it was only enough for one attack. Moreover, it would cause irreparable damage to the cultivators inside the warships and even the warships themselves. This could be considered a forbidden power of the Tiger Shark warships. The pilot would never use it unless it was absolutely necessary. The cultivators of the pirate group naturally wouldn't do this. However, under the control of the Black Umbrella, they had no choice. The cultivators inside the two warships began to visibly thin. Soon they were all skin and bones. This was a sign that the essence of their blood and chi was being injected into the warships. Yu Yao from the Flame Clan immediately realized that something was wrong. He had only ordered his warships to surround the enemy. He didn't say that he had to use so much energy. What shocked him even more was that the attacks of the two warships were actually locked onto him. "What are you doing?" The Flame Clan member roared in shock and anger. Even if he was Yu Yao, he didn't want to take the brunt of the attacks of the two Tiger Shark warships head-on. What was going on with these two warships? He didn't have much time to think about it. Because of this momentary delay, the attacks of the two Tiger Shark warships had reached their peak. The violent energy fluctuations were so strong that even the warships themselves felt like they couldn't control them. The already tattered warships began to shake violently. Run! Yu Yao from the Flame Clan saw that the situation wasn't right. How could he still be in the mood to chase after the precious blood clone? He immediately turned around and ran. However, it was too late. Two bright beams of light shot out from the top of the warships like two sharp swords. The moment Yu Yao from the Flame Clan turned around, the beams of light crisscrossed through the space he was in. At the same time, two balls of smoke exploded in the starry sky. The two Tiger Shark warships really couldn't withstand such an explosion. Or rather, they should have been able to withstand it. However, because they had been damaged by the combined attacks of the Black Umbrella and Mu He, they were unable to withstand it. Such a violent explosion had even caused the warships to explode. The cultivators inside the warships were already in a bad condition, so how could they survive? As for Yu Yao from the Flame Clan, who was being attacked by the two warships, when the light of the two crisscrossing swords dissipated, there was almost no place on his body that was unscathed. Blood flowed out of his torn flesh, boiling hot like lava. His expression was both miserable and fearful. If he hadn't summoned a precious defensive treasure at the critical moment, he would have been killed on the spot. Even so, he was still severely injured. His heart was filled with rage, but at the same time he was also somewhat bewildered. It didn't make sense that his own warships would attack him like this. What on earth happened? Before he could figure it out, his expression suddenly changed. This was because Yu Yao's aura was rapidly approaching him from a floating continent to the side. The Flame Clan member turned around and was stunned. Wood Spirit. The characteristics of the Wood Spirit clan were too obvious. He could tell at a glance that this was a Wood Spirit, Yu Yao. But why would a Wood Spirit attack him when there was no enmity between them? Moreover, wasn't the Wood Spirit clan one of the most peace-loving races in the universe? Who was this murderous look on her face as if there was no one else around? For a moment, Yu Yao of the Flame Clan thought that she had encountered a fake Wood Spirit. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. He was an early Yu Yao and so was the Wood Spirit attacking him. Under normal circumstances he wouldn't be afraid, but the current situation wasn't good. How could he be in the mood to fight with this strange Wood Spirit? He immediately turned around and dashed into the distance, but as soon as he charged out of the cover of a floating continent, something that looked like a cloud came straight at him. What was this? Yu Yao of the Flame Clan was completely engulfed by the spore cloud before she could even react. Mu He, who was right behind her, brazenly charged into the cloud. Lu Ye's main body slowly appeared behind a nearby meteor. He glanced at the two shattered Tiger Shark warships, then cast his gaze toward the spore cloud. He couldn't see much, but he could tell that there was an intense battle going on inside. Yu Yao of the Flame Clan was also angrily questioning him. Why would this Wood Spirit and the Spore race ambush him here? Why did they act like they had an irreconcilable enmity with him? What kind of grudge did they have against him? This battle didn't take too long. It only took about 30 breaths of time before the spore cloud dissipated. Muhi's body was covered in burn marks. As a member of the Wood Spirit clan, he was actually most afraid of the Flame clan. The two clans could be said to be natural enemies, but with the help of the Black Umbrella, it was not difficult to deal with a heavily injured Flame clan member. At most, he would suffer some injuries. Yu Yao of the Flame clan had already been killed. Her body was in tatters and bright red mushrooms could be seen on her body. It was a horrifying sight to behold. Muhi and Black Umbrella, on the other hand, were excited. This was the first time they'd killed an enemy at Yu Yao's level. However, both of them knew that if it weren't for Lu Ye's sharp mind and careful planning, they wouldn't have been able to kill a cultivator at the same level as them so easily. Their previous gloominess had already vanished into thin air, and they felt a sense of satisfaction as if they'd just gotten their revenge. Muhi thought viciously as he looked at Yu Yao's corpse. This is what happens when you set your sights on the Flower Realm. Little friend, there's still one more late-stage Yu Yao. Muhi's eyes blazed with fighting spirit. After killing an enemy who was his nemesis, and with Black Umbrella's help, he felt like there was nothing he couldn't do. Even if it was a late-stage Yu Yao, he could still kill one for Lu Yi to see. Lu Yi stared speechlessly at Muhi, who seemed to be in a daze. He thought back to the records he'd read in the dwarf race. The Wood Spirit clan was one of the most peaceful races in the universe. That record, there was a big problem. Forget about that late-stage Yu Yao. Lu Yi suppressed Muhi's thoughts. Killing an early-stage Yu Yao was one thing, but if it was a late-stage Yu Yao, they were no match for her. Muhi and Black Umbrella would just be wasting their time. End of chapter. Chapter 1677. Once the battle was decided, Lu Yi would join forces with Muhi and Black Umbrella to eliminate 2 tiger shark warships of the Divine Wind Pirate Gang and 1 early-stage Yu Yao. Of course, a pirate gang had more people than that, but the others had been left far behind in the pursuit. Lu Yi naturally wouldn't waste time looking for them. Right now, it was more important to leave this place as soon as possible. Although the battle just now had been short, it had caused quite a commotion. It was possible that the white-haired old man would be drawn here. While thinking this, Lu Ye's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He hurriedly looked in a certain direction and saw a streak of light rapidly approaching. Judging from the aura he sensed from the distance, who else could it be but the white-haired old man? This guy had indeed been lured here. Lu Yi hurriedly called out, "Fellow Taoist Qianying." Inside the Flower Realm, Hua Qianying had been waiting anxiously ever since she opened the door and let Muhi and Black Umbrella out. Without knowing the situation of the battle outside, she was extremely nervous. However, she didn't want to disturb Lu Yi, so she could only wait. It was only at this moment that she heard Lu Ye's call that she quickly responded, "Here. Open the door to the Flower Realm and receive the 2 chiefs." Understood. Hua Qianying hurriedly carried out the order. The next moment, Lu Ye's divine sense surged, and a door appeared in front of him. Under Lu Ye's command, Muhi and Black Umbrella rushed into the door and disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already inside the Flower Realm. Lu Yi flashed to Yu Yao's side and calmly took her storage ring before summoning a star boat and leaving. A moment later, the white-haired old man who had also arrived on a star boat, saw the tattered corpse of Yu Yao and couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't understand how Yu Yao, the only general under his command, had died here in such a short time. He also tried to contact the 2 tiger shark warships, but no matter how he tried, there was no response. They were most likely dead. The Flower Realm had been seized, and even his pirate gang had suffered heavy losses. The white-haired old man's anger erupted like a volcano. He stared in the direction Lu Yi had fled and shouted, "This old man is not human if I don't kill you." Once again, the star boat turned into a streak of light and chased after Lu Yi at full speed. Both of them were on a star boat, but Yu Yao, who was at the late stage, was naturally much faster than Lu Yi. However, he didn't panic in the slightest. After his previous attempts, he was confident that he would be able to shake her off. The main reason was that as his cultivation base increased, the distance that his void spirit runes could cover had also increased. Therefore, as long as he teleported once more, he should be safe. Now was not the time. The distance between the doppelganger and the main body was not far enough. After another round of pursuit, Lu Yi had no choice but to activate the void spirit inscriptions and disappear in just a few minutes. Far behind him, the white-haired old man who was chasing after him saw this scene from afar. He couldn't understand what kind of miraculous treasure this kid was relying on to escape from his field of vision again and again. Fortunately, he had the ability to spy on the direction of Lu Ye's departure. Lu Ye appeared beside the precious blood clone and was about to take it back. However, he vaguely felt that something was wrong. Although he felt that he was probably safe now, he still had to be careful just in case. After pondering for a moment, he let the doppelganger continue to fly in a different direction from the main body. After a while, Lu Ye finally understood what was going on. This was because the white-haired old man whom he thought he had shaken off, had actually persevered and chased after him. Was it luck? Lu Ye felt that things weren't that simple. Logically speaking, the distance he had teleported was beyond the detection limit of the old man's divine sense. It should be impossible for the old man to know his true location. However, the old man had accurately chased after him several times. This wasn't just luck. Could it be that the old man had some kind of method to locate him? Lu Ye couldn't help but think of the time when he was chased by Yu Yao in the Wanxiang galaxy. At that time he couldn't get rid of her no matter how hard he tried. The white-haired old man's cultivation base was even higher than Yu Yao's. It was not impossible for him to have a similar method. Sure enough, he couldn't underestimate others. In the cultivation world there were too many strange secret techniques. Even a Sunshine Realm expert wouldn't dare to say that he was omniscient. Lu Ye's doppelganger was still outside, maintaining a distance from the main body. Seeing the white-haired old man chasing after him, Lu Ye didn't hesitate and teleported away again. He did this several times. Every time he teleported, the white-haired old man would be able to catch up. Lu Ye was finally sure that the old man had the ability to locate him. The difference in strength was too great. It seemed that it was impossible to shake the old man off unless the old man ran out of energy. However, a late-stage Yu Yao was chasing after him on a star boat. It didn't consume much of her magic power, so it was almost impossible to exhaust the old man's energy. Sure enough, he had to go to the Yin Yang Great Millstone. Only by using the special environment there would he have a chance of shaking the old man off. This was Lu Ye's original plan. However, now that he was being chased, he didn't have much time to relax. After making up his mind, Lu Ye determined the direction of the Yin Yang Great Millstone and teleported closer and closer. At the same time, he swallowed all kinds of spirit pills to replenish his energy. He didn't consume much spiritual power. It was mainly his soul power. The World King Flower was attached to the Rainbow Divine Lotus. Although it didn't put too much of a burden on Lu Ye, it consumed a lot of his soul power. He had to replenish his soul power every once in a while. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to hold on. A month passed by in the blink of an eye. Lu Ye was still relatively calm. He just kept teleporting and fleeing. On the other hand, the white-haired old man who had been chasing him was gradually wavering. He originally thought that a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator had gotten lucky and obtained the World King Flower. He wouldn't be able to hold on for long, not to mention that the old man had activated a red talisman. Therefore, as long as he kept chasing, the old man wouldn't have time to recover. When he ran out of spiritual power, the old man would be at his mercy. However, a month had passed. A whole month had passed. The late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator didn't show any signs of running out of spiritual power. Every time the old man chased him to a certain distance, the old man would teleport away using that strange method. The old man couldn't understand. What kind of treasure was that? Could be used without limit. Even more so, he couldn't understand how a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator could have such a huge reserve of spiritual power. Even if he kept swallowing spirit pills to recover, he shouldn't be able to hold on for so long. It wasn't a good thing to consume too many spirit pills. Moreover, time was needed to refine them. Although there were many things he couldn't understand, it was a fact that he hadn't succeeded in chasing after the old man for a month despite crossing a major realm. Ordinary late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators were naturally helpless in the face of such a pursuit. However, Lu Ye relied on the might of his talent tree. As long as he had enough resources and fuel, his spiritual power and soul power wouldn't be exhausted. It was nothing more than being chased for a month and his mind was a little tired. It wasn't a big deal. Moreover, this trace of fatigue quickly dissipated. Because he had arrived at his destination. Yin Yang Great Millstone, just like its name. Looking from afar, there really seemed to be a huge millstone lying across the void. That millstone was red and blue, and they were clearly separated. Looking from afar, one could even see that these two colors were spinning in different directions. It was as if this millstone was really grinding something. Around the huge millstone, the red and blue streams of light transformed into seemingly tangible ribbons that drifted in all directions. Even though Lu Yi had already seen many wonders of space, he was still stunned by the magnificent scenery before him. Lu Yi found this place to be very lively. In fact, he had been meeting a few cultivators on and off since a few days ago. Most of them were full of vitality, and it looked like they had come here to temper their physiques. This situation became more obvious the closer one got to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. A space wonder like this that could temper one's physique was rare in the entire galaxy. Those cultivators who wanted to improve their physiques naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. In particular, some cultivators who had been stuck in the late-stage constellation realm for many years yearned to find an opportunity to break through here. If they could borrow the power of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone to temper their physiques to the extreme, they would have a chance to peek into the Moonjade realm. It wasn't just the constellation realm cultivators who came here. Lu Yi even ran into Yu Yao who was passing by. However, whether it was the constellation realm cultivators or Yu Yao, they both sensed that Lu Yi was being hunted down and didn't approach. This sort of thing was far too common in the starry skies. Generally speaking, when encountering such a situation, cultivators would choose to remain aloof and ignore it. This was because no one knew who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. Rashly intervening would only invite trouble. While Lu Yi was observing the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, the white-haired old man was also observing it. In fact, he had already realized that Lu Ye's destination was this place half a month ago. Compared to an outsider like Lu Yi, the Divine Wind Pirate Gang had been active in this part of the starry skies for many years. Naturally, their understanding of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone far surpassed Lu Ye's. The old man saw through Lu Ye's intentions. This boy was obviously desperate and wanted to enter the Yin-Yang Great Millstone to find an opportunity. Since ancient times, there had indeed been some constellation realm cultivators who had obtained benefits from this place and tempered their bodies to the extreme, gaining the opportunity to become Yu Yao. However, there weren't many such people. Moreover, becoming a Yu Yao wasn't a simple matter. Even if one's physique reached the extreme, there were still many things that needed to be prepared. It wasn't something that could be easily promoted. The old man was powerless to stop Lu Ye's actions, so he simply allowed him to do as he pleased. Moreover, once he entered the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, it would be easier for him to kill Lu Yi and take back the World King Flower. No matter what strange treasure that boy had used to teleport, it would be greatly restricted in a place like the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. If that boy wanted to make a fuss in the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, he was clearly making a mistake. Moreover, such a starry skies spectacle had a very strong suppression on a cultivator. If a late-stage Yu Yao like him entered, his situation would definitely be much better than a late-stage constellation realm cultivator like Lu Yi. Therefore, as the old man watched Lu Yi rush straight towards the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, he began to look forward to it. This was truly a case of not wanting to walk the path to heaven but wanting to rush through the gates of hell. End of chapter. Chapter 1678. The closer he got to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, the more Lu Yi could feel the magnificence of this starry sky wonder. In terms of size, this was definitely the largest starry sky wonder he had ever seen. Even the 10,000 elephant sea could not compare to it. This was expected because this starry sky wonder had always been growing. Its current size was already extraordinary, and in the future, it might even swallow the surrounding galaxies. When that time came, its size would simply be immeasurable. Although its growth was swallowing everything around it, cultivators who came here would not be affected much. At the very least, Lu Yi did not feel like he was being swallowed. A few days later, he finally arrived at the periphery of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. Lu Yi was surprised to find that there was a market-like place not far away, and there were many cultivators gathered there. Normally, he would definitely go there for a stroll, but now that he was being hunted, how could he have the time? He plunged into the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. In an instant, it was as if he had entered another starry sky. From the outside, the Yin-Yang Great Millstone was a huge millstone with two colors, red and blue, grinding in different directions. Lu Yi had entered from the blue part, so he thought that after entering, it would be a world filled with blue, but in fact this was not the case. There was no blue or red here, only an invisible force field filling the space. Lu Yi could clearly feel that the invisible force was like an invisible millstone, and no matter where he was in a state of being ground. Because of the interference of this strange force, even his vision was affected, and the surrounding space was distorted to the extreme. Even with Lu Ye's vision, he could not see too far away. Sensing it carefully, he did not feel anything special. Although the invisible force field was constantly grinding with his physique, he could ignore this effect. It seemed that he would have to go deeper. He had just entered, so it was normal that he did not feel much. Perhaps only when he went deep enough would he be able to feel something different. Because he could not determine the mysteries of this starry sky wonder, Lu Yi had already taken back all his precious blood clones before entering. Now, he had condensed a new clone and let it fly in different directions from his main body just in case. Not long after, Lu Yi felt a divine sense lock onto him from afar. Unsurprisingly, it was the white-haired old man who had chased after him. After a month of being hunted down, Lu Yi was already used to it. As long as his doppelganger could maintain contact with his main body, he was not afraid of being hunted down. However, now that he had entered the Yin-Yang Great Millstone, he had to find a way to shake off the other party. Otherwise, he would not be able to properly comprehend the situation if he was constantly being pursued. Back then, the reincarnation tree had only told him to try his best to come here. As for what benefits he would get after coming here, it had not mentioned at all. Lu Yi wasn't sure what kind of ability the old man had to be able to lock onto his position. It wouldn't have been easy to shake him off outside, but the environment here was special. Space was distorted, making it much easier to shake him off. There would definitely be a chance. He ran forward with his head lowered, and the old man chased after him. He had also come here to temper his physique in the past, so he naturally knew more about the mysteries of this place than Lu Yi. Seeing Lu Yi actually courting death by rushing inside, a trace of joy flashed across his eyes as he coldly snorted, "Ignorant fools." In fact, there was not much danger inside the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. As long as a cultivator knew their limits, they would more or less be able to obtain some benefits here. However, it was still a wonder that existed with the starry sky. Any wonder like this could be regarded as an ancient relic. The environment inside was completely different from the environment of today's starry sky. For today's cultivators, even if they stayed inside, they would still feel a certain degree of suppression. And this kind of suppression would become stronger the deeper they went. Therefore, so far, no one knew what the core of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone was like. Even Rizhao did not have the ability to enter that place. It was rumored that the core of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone contained a starry sky treasure, but whether it was true or not was impossible to judge. At first, there was nothing abnormal, but as time passed and he went deeper, the white-haired old man clearly felt that the suppression on his body was getting stronger and stronger. The environment of the starry sky in ancient times was different from the environment of today's starry sky. As a result, creatures born in different environments had different adaptability. For example, fish were born in the water and tigers and leopards were born in the forest. Even if the white-haired old man was a tiger or leopard, he would not be able to move freely in the water. Therefore, Lu Yi was surprised to find that the divine sense that had locked onto him seemed to be rapidly weakening. Even the spiritual power fluctuations of the white-haired old man behind him were weakening. At first, he thought that the 1-month chase had exhausted the old man too much. But as this situation became more and more obvious, he soon thought of something. On the way back to the 9 provinces, when he entered the Mist Dragon Starry Sky Wonder with Li Shang had said to him, "Almost 99% of the starry sky wonders in the starry sky had a great suppression on the cultivators who entered them." This was because the environment of these starry sky wonders preserved an extremely ancient charm that cultivators of today's era could not adapt to. In this world, only one kind of person could ignore this kind of influence. That was the cultivator who had participated in the battle for the spirit sea of the reincarnation tree and won, and who had used the spirit light nurtured in the Alpha Origin realm to ascend to the Constellation realm. This was because the Alpha Origin realm was also the most ancient environment in the world. The spirit light nurtured in it was refined by the cultivator, and the cultivator had the ability to adapt to this ancient environment. Lu Yi had participated in the battle for the Constellation Hall with Pu Ku and Ghost. When they entered the Constellation Hall projection, both Pu Ku and Ghost were greatly suppressed. Only Lu Yi was unaffected. This was also the reason why so many domains were keen to send their rising stars to participate in the battle for the Divine Sea. It was not just for fame but also because once they won, they would have an innate advantage in exploring the starry sky wonders in the future. In the starry sky there were countless starry sky wonders. There were many dangers, but at the same time, there were many opportunities and benefits. Those Sunshine Realm cultivators were most keen to explore the starry sky wonders. If they had the ability to ignore the suppression of the starry sky wonders, it would naturally be of great benefit. In this world, Lu Yi was not the only one who could be immune to the suppression of this ancient environment. Any cultivator who had refined the Alpha Origin Realm's spirit light had this ability, but this did not include the white-haired old man who was chasing after him. Realizing this, Lu Ye's heart calmed down. He was originally worried that even if he entered the Starry Sky Wonders, he would not be able to shake off the enemy. What should he do? He could not keep running like this. Now it seemed that as long as he continued to go deeper, the enemy would not be able to hold on any longer. With this thought in mind, Lu Yi immediately recalled the blood clone that he had released earlier. There was no need to leave the clone outside as it would consume the power of the blood clone. As Lu Yi continued to go deeper and deeper, the distance between him and the old man gradually changed. Originally, the distance between them was constantly closing, but as time passed, the closing speed began to slow down, and then it could no longer be closed. Instead, it began to expand. The eyes of the white-haired old man who was chasing after Lu Yi turned red. At this point, how could he not understand that Lu Yi was a cultivator who had participated in the battle for the Divine Sea and won? Only such a person in this world had the ability to not be affected by the ancient environment of the Starry Sky Wonders. He was still persevering. Although Lu Yi was not affected by the ancient environment, the power of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone itself was not something any cultivator could resist. The omnipresent grinding force was also a test. The old man hoped that with his stronger strength, he could go deeper than Lu Yi. This way there was a possibility that he could catch up. His cultivation was gradually slipping, and this slipping was due to the suppression of the ancient environment. From the late stage of the Moon Jade realm, he slowly fell to the middle stage and finally to the early stage. It was only when he was about to fall into the Moon Jade realm that the white-haired old man stopped, his face full of unwillingness. He looked in the direction that Lu Yi had fled and shouted in anger. He could not catch up. To him this was simply intolerable. However, he did not dare to continue. This position was already the limit of what he could endure. If he went any further, once his cultivation was suppressed below the Moon Jade realm, the terrifying grinding force would most likely cause him to explode and die on the spot. He really could not understand. Even he could not endure, so how could a late-stage Constellation Realm cultivator endure? This depth was not something a Constellation Realm cultivator could reach. Even a body cultivator could not. A Constellation Realm body cultivator could not, but Lu Yi could. His physique had always been comparable to a body cultivator of the same realm. Now that his cultivation had reached the peak of the Constellation Realm, he had comprehended the blood clan's inheritance, and after condensing the blood clone's blood, his physique had reached a new height. It could be said that in the current Constellation Realm, there was almost no one who could compare to him in terms of physique, unless it was a cultivator from an extremely special race. Even so, Lu Yi felt that he was about to reach his limit. Fortunately, the white-haired old man had stopped. If he had continued to pursue, Lu Yi really did not know how to shake him off. Now that he had finally shaken off his pursuers, Lu Yi was in a great mood. He continued forward until he felt that he had reached his limit. Only then did he stop. While fleeing earlier, he had sensed the auras of a few cultivators. Those cultivators were clearly here to temper their bodies. However, this place was not suitable for fighting. Hence, no matter who entered, they all maintained the principle of not interfering with each other. Not only were there Constellation Realm cultivators, but there were also Yu Yao cultivators who came here to temper their bodies. Lu Yi could not even see a single Yu Yao at this depth. After all, even a late-stage Yu Yao cultivator like the white-haired old man could not go any further. It was easy to imagine how powerful this place was. Of course, if there were Yu Yao cultivators who had refined Alpha Origin spirit lights, this depth was definitely not the limit. They could ignore the cultivation suppression brought about by the ancient era's environment and naturally go further. Lu Yi sat down cross-legged and calmly sensed the omnipresent grinding force, comprehending the changes in his body. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.